For nearly 200,000 years, the human body moved through a world where food did not arrive every day. There were long stretches of waiting, quiet hours shaped by uncertainty, and entire days where eating simply did not happen. That rhythm was not a mistake. It was the condition in which the body learned to survive, to store, to release, and to endure. Today, that same body wakes into a world where meals are constant, predictable, and rarely absent. And in that constant rhythm, something older may begin to lose its place, as if a system built for cycles is now held in a single, unbroken state. The discomfort is often subtle, not sharp, but persistent, like a signal that never fully resolves. If the human body was shaped across 200,000 years of irregular eating, then what pattern was it meant to follow? And why does eating every day feel wrong for your body? And what is the ancient reason why? For nearly 200,000 years, the human body moved through a world where food did not arrive by a clock. There was no morning table waiting in the same place, no fixed noon meal, no quiet promise that the day would end with something warm and certain. Food belonged to the land before it belonged to the hand. It came from weather, from movement, from memory of paths, from the ripening of plants, from the tracks of animals, from the chance discovery of something edible beneath leaves, bark, soil, or stone. To eat was not simply to choose. It was to meet a condition that had finally become possible. This is where the question begins, not in a modern kitchen, but in a much older landscape, where the body learned that hunger and waiting were not rare interruptions. They were part of the ordinary shape of being alive. A person living in such a world did not need to think of food as a schedule. The body met the day first, and food came later, if the day allowed it. Sometimes the land gave more than expected. Sometimes it gave little. Sometimes movement led toward nourishment. Sometimes movement only used energy without replacing it right away. What mattered was not regularity, but response. The human body learned to continue through unevenness, to carry yesterday's energy into today, to make use of what had been stored, and to slow certain demands when the world had not yet offered more. This does not mean ancient life was a constant emergency, and it does not mean hunger should be romanticized. It only means that the human body's deepest history was shaped in a world where food was not always present, and where not eating for a while was not automatically a failure of life. In the modern world, eating every day can feel so normal that anything else feels strange. Yet from the longer view of human history, the strange thing may be the certainty itself. The body now wakes into rooms where food can be bought, stored, prepared, delivered, and eaten again before true absence has even had time to form. The spaces between meals grow shorter. The silence between one intake and the next becomes thinner. A person may eat because it is morning, because it is noon, because the workday allows a break, because a screen is on, because food is near, because everyone else is eating, or because the body has learned to expect a signal at a certain hour. None of this is wrong in a moral sense. It is part of modern life, but it is very different from the conditions under which the human body first became human. The old world did not ask the body to remain constantly supplied. It asked the body to shift. It asked the body to wait. It asked the body to move through periods of having and not having, fullness and emptiness, effort and rest, searching and receiving. That shifting rhythm may matter more than it first appears. A body that is always being fed may not be harmed by every meal, but it may be living inside a pattern that is historically unusual. The feeling that something is slightly wrong after constant eating may not come from one single meal. It may come from the disappearance of contrast. Fullness means something different when it follows real hunger. Rest means something different when it follows real effort. Food means something different when it comes after uncertainty. Without those contrasts, the body can enter a dull middle state, neither truly empty nor deeply satisfied, neither waiting nor recovering, only continuing. The ancient beginning of humanity was not built around abundance as a permanent background. It was built around change. The stomach, the liver, the muscles, the brain, and the hormones that help regulate energy did not evolve inside a world of endlessly repeated meals. They evolved inside a world where energy had to be managed across time, where the body had to remember, in its own quiet way, that not every hour would bring food. This is why the first step is not to ask whether eating every day is simply good or bad. That question is too blunt for a history this long. The deeper question is why the body can feel unsettled in a world that seems to be giving it everything. Perhaps the discomfort is not a rejection of food itself, but a faint echo of a much older rhythm, one that began when eating was never guaranteed, and the body had to live between the moments when the world finally gave something back. To understand why eating every day can sometimes feel strangely heavy, it helps to begin before food became a habit, and look at the older relationship between the body and the ground beneath it. For most of human history, food was not separated from place. It was tied to a valley after rain, to a shoreline at low tide, to a stand of fruiting trees, to a patch of roots remembered from an earlier season, to animal movement across open land, or to the slow return of certain plants after warmth and water changed the soil. The body did not live beside a permanent supply. It lived inside a changing map. Hunger, in that world, was not only a feeling in the stomach, it was information about distance, timing, memory, and the condition of the landscape. A person might know that one area had been useful before, but the body still had to move there. A group might remember that certain foods appeared in a certain season, but the season still had to arrive. Food was therefore not just something taken into the mouth. It was a result of alignment between body, environment, and time. This matters because the modern experience of eating often removes that alignment. Food appears without distance. It appears without weather. It appears without the long bodily process that once came before it. The hand reaches, the mouth receives, and the body is given energy before it has passed through the older sequence of need, search, effort, delay, and relief. Nothing about this should be turned into a simple judgment. Modern food security has protected countless people from suffering, and regular meals can be important for many lives and many bodies. But the long history of the human body was not shaped by perfect regularity. It was shaped by a world where the path to food often came before the food itself. That path may have been quiet. It may have been slow. It may have involved walking, watching, digging, carrying, waiting, and returning with less than expected. In such a rhythm, the body did not experience eating as an isolated event. Eating was the end of a longer arc. The empty feeling before food had a place. The movement before food had a place. The uncertainty before food had a place. And because those earlier stages had a place, the meal itself entered the body differently. Fullness arrived after expenditure. Taste arrived after attention. Rest arrived after movement. In the present, the order can be reversed. Fullness can arrive before real effort. Energy can arrive before the body has asked deeply for it. Eating can happen while sitting still, while the mind is distracted, while the body has not yet moved far from the last meal. Over time, this may create a subtle confusion, not because the body rejects food, but because one of the oldest contexts around food has been removed. The body receives the final step without the beginning of the journey. From the ancient point of view, this is an unusual condition. The early human body had to survive through gaps. It had to carry fuel across uncertain hours. It had to decide, through systems far older than conscious thought, when to conserve, when to release, when to use stored energy, and when to respond strongly to a chance to eat. These systems did not emerge in a world of constant access. They emerged in a world where the land changed its answer from day to day. Some days, food may have been plentiful enough to share, store briefly, or leave the body deeply satisfied. Other days, the search may have continued longer, and the body had to keep going. This irregularity was not a side detail of human history. It was part of the basic atmosphere in which human biology learned its patterns. The discomfort of modern eating can begin to make sense when seen against that atmosphere. A person may eat every day and still feel that the body is not lighter, clearer, or more settled. The reason may not be one food, one habit, or one failure of will. It may be that the body is living in a rhythm where the ancient spaces around food have disappeared. The waiting has become short. The walking has become optional. The uncertainty has been replaced by certainty. The landscape has been replaced by storage. The season has been replaced by routine. In that change, eating loses some of the older signals that once told the body where it was in the cycle of need and return. A meal no longer says, "The search is over." It may only say, "The The schedule has arrived. And perhaps that is why the body can feel quietly unsettled, even in a world full of food. It is not remembering a romantic past. It is not asking to suffer. It may simply be carrying systems shaped in a time when eating belonged to movement, place, weather, and delay. And when the body understood food because it first understood absence. The first human relationship with food was not built around repetition. It was built around interruption. A day could begin without knowing when the next real intake would come, and the body had to live inside that uncertainty without collapsing at the first sign of emptiness. This is difficult to feel from the modern world, because modern eating often begins before uncertainty has had time to become real. A person wakes, and food is already possible. A person works, and food can be carried in a bag, stored in a drawer, ordered from a distance, or taken from a shelf. The body is surrounded by answers before it has fully asked the question. But in the older world where human biology took shape, food was not an answer waiting nearby. It was a possibility spread across the land. It might be found after movement. It might be found after waiting. It might be missed entirely. This older pattern does not prove that eating every day is unnatural or wrong. That would be too simple and too careless. But it does show that the human body did not begin in a world where every day was divided into fixed meals, predictable portions, and repeated fullness. It began in a world where the body had to remain useful even when the stomach was not full, and where the space before food was often as important as the food itself. In that space, the body was not doing nothing. It was adjusting. It was drawing on what had been stored. It was shaping attention, movement, and patience around the chance that food might come later. This is one reason the modern rhythm can feel strangely dull. When food arrives every day, at regular hours, with little movement and little delay, the body may lose the older contrast that once helped each state make sense. Hunger was once connected to searching. Fullness was once connected to return. Rest was once connected to effort. Satisfaction was once connected to uncertainty resolving for a while. In many modern days, those links are weakened. Hunger may be prevented before it rises. Fullness may arrive while the body has barely moved. Eating may happen not because the land has given something back, but because the clock, the habit, or the room has suggested it. Again, this is not a moral failure. It is a historical change. The body is living inside a new arrangement, while carrying systems formed in a much older one. For early humans, food timing was likely uneven because the world itself was uneven. Seasons changed what was available. Weather changed movement. Animal behavior changed opportunity. Plant foods appeared, faded, returned, or failed. Coastal, forest, grassland, and river environments each offered different patterns, but none of them resembled a permanent table. Even when people learned a landscape well, knowledge did not erase uncertainty. Memory could guide a path, but it could not command a season. Skill could improve the chance of finding food, but it could not turn the living world into a machine. The human body therefore had to become a body of intervals. It had to pass from enough to not enough, from storing to releasing, from searching to resting, from effort to recovery. The important point is not that people of the past were always hungry. They were not one simple image. Human groups lived in many environments, with many foods, many rhythms, and many degrees of difficulty. The careful truth is quieter. For most of human time, food was not guaranteed in the modern way. This uncertainty became one of the background conditions of being human. It shaped how the body handled energy, how it responded to absence, and how it made sense of the return of food. When that background disappears almost completely, the body enters a world that is safer in many ways, but also unfamiliar in its constant supply. This may be why eating every day can sometimes feel less like comfort, and more like being held in one state too long. The body may be fed, yet not feel deeply reset. It may be full, yet not feel truly restored. It may receive food again and again, while some older cycle of emptiness, movement, and return never has room to complete itself. The ancient reason is not a single rule hidden inside the body. It is a long history of living with gaps. The first human bodies did not meet food as a daily appointment. They met it as a changing event inside a changing world. And when a modern body feels uneasy in the middle of abundance, it may be quietly revealing that the oldest human rhythm was never constant fullness, but the slow movement between need, waiting, finding, and enough. The body does not treat food as a simple object that arrives and disappears. It treats food as time. Every meal is broken down, moved, stored, transformed, and slowly used across the hours that follow. Even after the taste is gone, the body is still reading what has entered. Some of it becomes immediate fuel. Some of it is held for later. Some of it changes the signals that tell the body whether to stay active, conserve, repair, rest, or search again. This is why the ancient rhythm of eating was never only about the mouth or the stomach. It was about the whole body learning how to pass through change. In the older human world, food did not need to arrive constantly for the body to continue. The body carried reserves. It could draw on stored energy when the next meal had not yet appeared. It could shift from using what had just been eaten to using what had been saved from before. This ability is not a strange exception. It is one of the quiet foundations of human survival. A body that could only function when food was always present would not have lasted long in a landscape where food depended on weather, distance, season, and chance. The deeper story, then, is not that the body was made for starvation. That would be false and too harsh. The deeper story is that the body was made for rhythm. It was made to move between fed and unfed states, between receiving and using, between storing and releasing. Modern life often weakens that rhythm by keeping the body near food all the time. The old interval becomes shorter. The body is asked to process again before it has fully shifted into the next state. A meal follows a snack. A snack follows a drink. A drink follows another small intake. The body remains busy with arrival, digestion, storage, and signal changes, while the older experience of true pause becomes rare. This may help explain why constant eating can feel heavy even when the food is not large. The heaviness is not always from quantity alone. It can come from the absence of transition. The body is not allowed to move cleanly from one internal condition to another. It stays close to the same fed state, and over time that sameness can feel like dullness. In the long beginning of humanity, internal change mattered. When food had been eaten, the body could store what it did not need immediately. When food was absent, the body could begin to release what had been stored. The liver, muscles, fat tissue, digestive system, and brain all belong to this larger pattern of energy management. They do not act as separate machines. They respond to timing, need, movement, rest, and signals passing through the blood. The human body is therefore not only a body that eats, it is a body that waits, measures, holds, spends, and begins again. The modern schedule can hide this from us. It can make eating appear as a simple daily duty, repeated because the hour has arrived. But inside the body, each intake changes the internal weather. The body must decide what to do with incoming energy, where to send it, what to store, and what signals to quiet or increase. If food keeps arriving before the previous internal process has settled, the body may still function, but the older wave of change becomes flattened. Instead of clear movement from hunger to food, from food to use, from use to waiting, the body may remain in a long, blurred middle. This is not a command to eat less, and it is not medical advice. Different people need different patterns, and regular meals can be necessary and protective for many. But from the point of view of deep history, the body's ability to function without constant intake is not an accident. It is part of the inheritance carried from a world where food was never guaranteed by the hour. The ancient body had to survive the space between meals, because that space was part of life itself. In that space, stored energy mattered, patience mattered, movement mattered, internal switching mattered. Today, when food is always near, the body may receive comfort while losing contrast. It may be nourished, yet rarely allowed to experience the quiet internal turn from receiving to releasing. And perhaps this is why eating every day, especially without real pauses, can feel less like support and more like a rhythm that never lets the body return to its older balance. A body that receives food is not finished when the stomach feels full. That is only the beginning of a long internal sequence. The food must be broken down into smaller forms, absorbed, carried through the blood, sorted by tissues, and woven into the body's ongoing decisions about energy. Some of that energy can be used soon, some can be stored. Some can influence whether the body feels alert, slow, warm, restless, heavy, or calm. This is why the older human relationship with food was never just about avoiding hunger. It was also about letting the body pass through different internal states. In a world where food came unevenly, these states had space to appear. After eating, the body could handle what had arrived. Later, when no new food came, it could turn toward what it had saved. That movement from receiving to using to waiting was not a punishment. It was one of the ordinary rhythms that helped the body remain alive in a world where the next intake could not be assumed. When food arrives again too quickly, the body may still do its work, but the sequence becomes crowded. The digestive system is asked to begin again. The storage systems are signaled again. The blood carries new material again. The body has less time to settle into the quieter phase where it uses what is already inside. Over many days, this can make eating feel strangely continuous, as if the body is being asked to keep receiving without being allowed to complete the older cycle. This feeling does not need to be dramatic. It may show itself as a soft heaviness after meals, a dullness that is hard to name, or a sense that the body is never quite empty and never quite satisfied. The ancient origin of this feeling lies in the fact that the human body is not only a container for food, it is a manager of time. It carries energy across hours, sometimes across long gaps, because early human life required that ability. The liver could store and release usable fuel, muscles could hold their own reserves, fat tissue could preserve energy for later use. Hormones helped coordinate whether energy should be stored, spent, conserved, or made available. These processes are not separate from human history. They are part of how human beings remained capable while moving through landscapes that did not promise a meal at a certain hour. The body had to know how to live after eating, and it had to know how to live when eating had not yet happened. That second ability is often hidden in modern life, because the absence of food is quickly treated as a problem to erase. A small signal of hunger may be answered at once. A quiet dip in energy may be covered with another intake. A moment of emptiness may be interrupted before the body has time to change state. In the short term, this can feel comforting, but over time, constant supply can blur the body's internal language. The signal that once marked the beginning of a search becomes only an inconvenience. The pause that once allowed stored energy to be used becomes rare. The return of food no longer closes a cycle, it simply continues one. This does not mean the body wants deprivation. It means the body evolved with transitions, and transitions gave meaning to each state. Fullness had meaning because emptiness existed before it. Stored energy had meaning because there were hours when new energy did not arrive. Appetite had meaning because it pointed toward action, attention, and timing. In the deep beginning of humanity, a meal was not isolated from the rest of the day. It belonged to movement before it, digestion after it, and uncertainty beyond it. Today, food can be detached from all three. It can arrive without movement, be repeated before digestion has fully settled, and erase uncertainty almost completely. The result is a life that is safer in many ways but biologically unfamiliar in its smoothness. The body may keep functioning, because the body is adaptable, yet adaptation does not mean every rhythm feels equally natural. A system shaped to alternate between receiving and releasing may feel burdened when the receiving side becomes too dominant. The discomfort may not be a clear warning, and it should not be turned into a simple rule, but it may be a clue. It may suggest that the human body still carries an older expectation of intervals, a quiet memory written not in thoughts, but in metabolism, storage, appetite, and energy use. Eating every day feels wrong for some people, not because food itself is wrong, but because the body's ancient design was never built around uninterrupted arrival. It was built around the slow intelligence of change, where the body could take in, hold back, draw out, and wait until the world offered food again. The human body is not a simple furnace that burns whatever arrives and then waits for more. It is more like a living tide, rising and falling with intake, movement, rest, temperature, attention, and time. When food enters, the body leans toward digestion and storage. When food does not enter, the body does not immediately fail. It begins to draw from what has already been held inside. This quiet change is one of the oldest human abilities. Long before fixed meals, long before stored grain, long before shops and kitchens and repeated daily schedules, the body had to manage energy through uneven time. It had to bridge the space between one chance to eat and the next. That space was not outside biology. It was part of biology. Every human body still carries traces of that older arrangement, because the systems that handle energy were shaped in a world where food could not be counted by hours. The body stores because the future is uncertain. It releases because the present may demand movement before food returns. It slows some processes and supports others because survival was never only about eating when food appeared. It was also about remaining capable when food had not yet appeared. This is the point where the modern feeling of discomfort begins to look less mysterious. If food keeps arriving before the body has passed through enough of the older interval, the internal tide becomes compressed. The body receives, stores, digests, and signals again, but the quieter movement into using what is already present may be shortened. The person may not feel hungry, but may also not feel clear. The stomach may not be empty, but the body may not feel deeply satisfied. The day may be full of small intakes, yet the body may feel strangely tired, as if it is being supported and burdened at the same time. From an ancient point of view, the problem is not simply the presence of food. Food is necessary, protective, and life-giving. The problem is the disappearance of contrast. A body built to move between states may feel unnatural when it is held too long near one state. In early human environments, contrast was everywhere. The body moved between shade and sun, cold and warmth, effort and stillness, thirst and water, hunger and relief. Food belonged to that wider pattern. It came after attention, after distance, after waiting, after the landscape had offered something. Even when food was available, it was still tied to a particular place and moment. The body could sense the difference between having and not having because the difference was real. Modern eating can soften that difference until it almost disappears. The refrigerator, the cupboard, the market, the delivery system, and the social clock all make food less like an event and more like a background condition. The body may begin the morning already expecting intake. It may meet the afternoon with another intake. It may enter the evening with still more. The rhythm becomes smooth, predictable, and repeated. But smoothness is not the same as balance. A river that never rises or falls is no longer behaving like a river. A body that rarely shifts between receiving and releasing may still be alive and nourished, but it may lose the feeling of movement inside itself. This does not mean a person should force hunger, ignore medical needs, or turn ancient life into a rule for modern living. Human bodies differ, and many people need regular food for reasons that are real and important. The careful lesson is broader and quieter. The human body was not shaped by constant arrival. It was shaped by cycles. It learned to use food across time, not only in the moment of eating. It learned to hold energy for later, because later was never guaranteed. It learned to release stored energy because the body often had to move before the world gave more. It learned that emptiness, in measured and ordinary forms, was not always danger. Sometimes emptiness was the doorway into another state. When modern life removes that doorway again and again, the body may feel as if one of its oldest movements has been interrupted. Eating every day can feel wrong, not because eating is wrong, and not because the past was better, but because the body may still expect a rhythm that modern abundance has almost erased. It may expect intake to be followed by time, fullness to be followed by lightness, storage to be followed by release, and need to be followed by return. The ancient reason is not a secret command hidden in the body. It is a long inheritance of alternating states. The body became human in a world where food was powerful because it was not always present, and where the space between meals taught the body how to remain alive, awake, and quietly prepared. Archaeology does not give us a diary of every ancient meal. It does not let us hear the stomach of a person walking through a dry valley, or know exactly how long a family waited before food returned. The record is quieter than that. It gives fragments, bones cut by stone tools, burned seeds, shell heaps near old coasts, grinding stones, traces of hearths, plant remains preserved by chance, animal bones gathered in certain places, and teeth that carry chemical signs of what kinds of foods passed through a life. These fragments do not allow one simple story for all people, because early human groups lived across many landscapes and used many kinds of food. But they do point toward one careful truth. For most of human history, eating was shaped by availability, and availability was uneven. The body did not live in a world where food was always close, always predictable, and always separated from effort. It lived in a world where the land gave signs, and the body had to read them. A shell heap near an ancient shoreline suggests repeated use of coastal food, but it also suggests place, tide, season, and return. A scatter of animal bones may show that people gained meat there, but it does not mean meat appeared every day. Charred plant remains may show that seeds, tubers, fruits, or other plant foods were used, but plants come and go with climate, soil, and season. The evidence is not a menu, it is a map of dependence. Human beings depended on living systems that changed. This is why the modern idea of eating every day can begin to feel historically strange. It is not that ancient people never ate regularly in some settings, or that every day was hard. The honest picture is more varied. Some environments offered rich food at certain times. Some groups may have known reliable places for water, fish, shellfish, roots, nuts, fruits, or animals. Human intelligence, social learning, tools, fire, and cooperation all improve the ability to find and prepare food. But improvement is not the same as control. A tool can cut meat, but it cannot make animals appear. Fire can transform food, but it cannot command plants to ripen. Memory can guide a path, but it cannot guarantee that the old place still holds what it once held. The archaeological record keeps reminding us that food was tied to conditions outside the body. When those conditions changed, the body had to adjust. In this older world, the space between meals was not empty history. It was part of the evidence of survival, even when it leaves no direct mark in the ground. We find the stone tool, but not the hunger before it. We find the hearth, but not the long walk before the fire was fed. We find animal remains, but not the days when no animal was taken. We find preserved seeds, but not all the seasons when the same plants were absent. The missing evidence matters because absence was part of the human food world. Modern abundance can make absence feel abnormal, but in deep human time, absence was one of the conditions the body had to live with. This does not mean ancient life should be imagined as constant suffering. That image is too flat. It means the body evolved amid uncertainty, and the archaeological traces are consistent with a life of variation rather than fixed daily sameness. The human body became skilled at using many foods because no single food could be trusted everywhere, all the time. It became flexible because the environment demanded flexibility. It became able to store energy, use stored energy, and keep moving through gaps because gaps were not rare accidents. They belonged to the landscape. When we look at old hearths and scattered bones, we are not only seeing what people ate, we are seeing the outline of a rhythm. Food had to be found, carried, shared, prepared, protected, or consumed before it spoiled. It belonged to moments. It belonged to places. It belonged to groups moving through time. This is very different from the modern room where food waits quietly, unchanged by weather, stored beyond season, and ready before hunger fully rises. The ancient evidence does not say that eating every day is wrong. It says something more useful and more careful. It says the body's first world was not built around permanent supply. It was built around changing access. And if the modern body sometimes feels uneasy in a life where food never truly leaves, that unease may be connected to a long, buried history in which food was never merely present. It had to arrive from somewhere, after time, after conditions, after effort, and after the world had allowed it. The archaeological record becomes most useful when we stop asking it for a perfect daily schedule. It cannot tell us whether one person ate at sunrise, or whether another waited until evening, or whether a group passed through 2 quiet days before finding enough food again. What it can show is a broader pattern of dependence on unstable sources. Ancient bones, shells, seeds, stone tools, hearths, and cooking traces all point toward a world where food was gathered from living systems, and living systems are never still. Rivers rise and fall, herds move. Trees fruit and then become bare. Shorelines change with tide and season. Roots may be found in one place and missing in another. Even when people knew their landscapes well, they were still moving through conditions that could shift around them. This is important because the human body was not shaped only by what was eaten. It was shaped by the uncertainty around eating. A bone with cut marks can suggest butchery. A hearth can suggest cooking. A grinding stone can suggest plant processing. But each trace is also surrounded by invisible time, the search before the tool was used, the walking before the fire was made, the waiting before the plant could be gathered, the failed attempts that left no beautiful evidence behind. These missing moments are not small. They are where the body learned to handle the interval between need and return. Modern life often removes that interval so completely that it becomes hard to imagine. Food appears as if it belongs to the room, not to a season. It waits in packages, boxes, bowls, cupboards, and bright aisles. It does not run away. It does not fail to ripen. It does not depend on whether the river is low or whether the animal paths have changed. Because of this, modern eating can feel like a smooth surface laid over a much rougher history. The body receives food repeatedly, but the older context has been flattened. The ancient record reminds us that food once came from a living world that answered unevenly. This does not mean people were helpless. Human beings were remarkably adaptive. They learned to use tools, fire, cooperation, memory, language, and shared knowledge to widen what could be eaten and to reduce risk. They could return to useful places, follow seasonal cues, divide labour, share food, and teach younger generations what the land had taught older ones. But even these strengths did not remove uncertainty. They only made it more manageable. A skilled group could know where shellfish were likely to be found, but still had to reach the shore at the right time. They could know where edible plants might grow, but still had to wait for the right season. They could track animals, but tracking was never the same as certainty. This is the careful middle ground that keeps the story truthful. The past was not a simple nightmare of hunger, and it was not a perfect natural paradise. It was a world of variable access, and the human body developed inside that variation. The body's energy systems, appetite signals, storage patterns, and ability to keep functioning without immediate intake all make more sense when placed in that kind of world. If a meal came after a long search, the body received it after effort. If food was abundant for a short period, the body could store some of that energy. If food was absent later, the body could draw from what had been stored. This rhythm left few direct marks in the ground, yet it is written across the logic of survival. Archaeology gives us the remains of food, but biology helps us understand the gaps between them. Together, they suggest that the early human body was not living under a fixed promise of daily fullness. It was living inside a cycle of finding, using, waiting, and adjusting. That cycle is the ancient background behind the modern discomfort. When a person today eats by the clock, the body may receive energy without the older signals of movement, delay, and return. When food is always available, the body may rarely experience the clean shift from absence to nourishment. The archaeological traces do not command us to copy the past. They simply widen the question. They show that the body's first food world was not built from constant meals, but from changing opportunities. And somewhere beneath the modern routine, the body may still recognize that food once had to come from time, place, effort, and uncertainty before it could become part of us. The remains of ancient food are never complete, but their incompleteness tells us something important. Archaeology preserves what happened to survive. A broken tool, a burned seed, a pile of shells, a cut bone, a hearth darkened by old fire, a grinding stone worn smooth by repeated use. These traces are powerful, but they are also uneven, because the past itself was uneven. Soft foods vanish. Small meals leave little behind. A day of hunger leaves almost nothing in the soil. A failed search leaves no neat object for the future to hold. So when we look back at the deep human past, we are not seeing a full table. We are seeing scattered signs of arrival. Food appeared here. Fire was used there. An animal was processed in one place. Plants were prepared in another. Shellfish were gathered near water. Seeds were handled near heat. These signs do not form a daily calendar. They form a pattern of contact between human bodies and changing landscapes. And that pattern is one of the oldest reasons the modern body can feel uneasy when food becomes too constant. the archaeological record reminds us that eating was not only a biological act. It was a relationship with time, weather, terrain, tools, other people, and memory. A person did not simply eat because the hour had arrived. Food became possible because a path was taken, a place was known, a season had turned, a plant had ripened, water had moved, animals had passed, or a group had succeeded in bringing something back. Even in more reliable environments, the body was still linked to conditions outside itself. It lived in a world where food had to be encountered. Modern food, by contrast, often seems to have no origin in the day. It arrives already separated from the effort, season, risk, and delay that once surrounded it. The body receives the result, but not the older story that gave the result meaning. This difference matters because the human body did not evolve as a passive receiver of endless intake. It evolved as part of a moving system. The same body that digested food also walked toward it, searched for it, carried it, waited for it, shared it, and sometimes went without it. The same nervous system that noticed hunger also noticed distance, danger, fatigue, smell, memory, and the behavior of other people. The same metabolism that stored energy after eating also released energy when eating did not happen again soon. Archaeology does not show these processes directly, but it surrounds them with evidence. The tool implies the hand, the hearth implies gathering and preparation, the animal bone implies pursuit, scavenging, butchery, sharing, or transport. The seed implies season, plant knowledge, and repeated attention to small foods that could sustain life. Behind every trace of food is a larger rhythm that cannot be placed neatly in a display case. This rhythm is what modern eating often interrupts. When food is always present, the body may no longer need to move through the full sequence that once framed nourishment. It may not need to wait long enough for hunger to become a meaningful signal. It may not need to spend stored energy before new energy arrives. It may not need to experience the relief of return after uncertainty. A meal can become disconnected from the deeper cycle that once gave it biological weight. This does not make modern eating false, and it does not make ancient life better. It only shows that the body is living in a situation that is new by comparison with the long background of human survival. The ancient evidence gives us a careful answer, not an extreme one. It suggests that the body was shaped around variation, not sameness. It was shaped around food as an event, not food as permanent background. It was shaped around enough and not enough, finding and missing, storing and spending, waiting and returning. In that older world, eating every day in a fixed pattern was not the central rule of life. The central rule was adjustment. The body had to adjust to what the land gave, and when the land gave it. Today, the land has been replaced by systems that keep food close, stable, and repeated. This has brought safety and comfort that should not be dismissed. But it has also created a strange quiet distance between the body and the rhythm that formed it. When eating every day feels wrong, the feeling may not be a clear message against food. It may be a softer recognition that something around food has changed too completely. The body still knows how to live between moments. It still knows how to store, release, wait, and begin again. Yet modern life often asks it to keep receiving, as if the ancient spaces between meals never existed. The buried record of bones, seeds, shells, tools, and hearths does not give us a rule to obey. It gives us a memory of conditions. It shows that human eating began as a changing relationship with the world, and that the body became human inside that change. Hunger is often treated as a problem that must be solved as quickly as possible. In modern life, even a small emptiness can feel like an alarm. A person may feel the first light pull in the stomach and immediately reach for food, not because the body is in danger, but because the feeling has become unfamiliar. The modern world teaches the body to expect interruption. Hunger begins, and something arrives. A signal rises, and it is silenced. The space between feeling and eating becomes very short. But in the older human world, hunger could not always be answered so quickly. It had to be carried for a while. It had to travel with the body through distance, weather, darkness, heat, cold, and uncertainty. This does not mean hunger was pleasant, and it should not be turned into something romantic. Hunger can become dangerous when it is prolonged or severe, but the first movements of hunger, the ordinary signals of emptiness, were not always signs of collapse. They were part of the body's way of telling the person that the internal state had changed. Something had been used. Something needed to be found. Something had to shift. For nearly 200,000 years, the human body lived with this kind of signal in a much more direct relationship to the land. Hunger did not point toward a refrigerator or a fixed meal break. It pointed toward movement, attention, memory, and response. It could sharpen awareness of smell, time, place, and opportunity. It could remind the body that stored energy might need to be released. It could help organize behavior around the search for food. The feeling itself was not the enemy. It was information. Modern life often removes the need to listen to that information carefully. Food is near before the signal has developed. The body is fed before the message has fully formed. Over time, hunger may become something people fear, misunderstand, or avoid entirely. Yet the human body did not evolve as a system that must never feel empty. It evolved as a system that could pass through emptiness and remain capable. The discomfort of eating every day can begin here, in the loss of hunger as a meaningful stage. When hunger is never allowed to exist for long, fullness also changes. Fullness no longer feels like the closing of a long arc. It becomes just another repeated state in a day that has not truly been empty. A meal after real hunger can bring relief, clarity, and rest. A meal after constant grazing may bring only weight. This difference is not only emotional, it reflects the older structure of energy use. The body has signals for receiving food, and it also has signals for using what is already stored. It has systems that respond when food enters, and systems that respond when food is absent. If the absence is always cut short, one half of the rhythm is muted. Hunger then loses its place, and eating loses some of its meaning. In early human environments, ordinary hunger was woven into daily survival. A person could wake without immediate food and still move. A group could walk toward a known area and still wait. A body could feel empty and still remain alive, alert and useful. Again, this does not mean every ancient body was healthy or that every hunger was safe. The truthful point is narrower and stronger. The body was shaped to recognize hunger as part of a cycle, not only as an emergency. Modern abundance can confuse that cycle. It can make the first whisper of hunger feel like failure, weakness, or something to erase. It can also make constant fullness feel normal, even when the body quietly feels crowded by it. When people say eating every day feels wrong, they may not be rejecting nourishment. They may be noticing that the body has lost contact with the older signal that once gave nourishment its timing. Hunger used to say, "The body has moved into another state." It used to open a small space where stored energy, patience, and attention became active. It used to connect the inner body to the outer world. Today, that signal may be softened, covered, or answered before it can speak clearly. And without that signal, the body may drift through food without the ancient contrast that once helped it understand why eating mattered. There is a difference between hunger that warns of danger and hunger that simply marks a change in the body's state. Modern life often blends these two together. The first small signal can feel urgent, as if the body is already falling behind. Yet for most of human history, the body could not afford to treat every ordinary emptiness as an emergency. It had to keep moving while waiting. It had to use stored energy while the next food source remained uncertain. It had to let hunger become part of the day, without allowing that feeling to break the whole system. This is one of the quiet reasons the ancient body was so dependent on rhythm. Hunger came, but it did not always end immediately. The body answered first from within itself. It released what had been stored. It adjusted energy use. It sharpened attention toward the outside world. It made food more meaningful when food finally returned. In that older pattern, hunger was not only a demand, it was a bridge between internal need and external search. A person did not have to name it with ideas or explain it with science. The body already knew through older systems that emptiness meant a shift had begun. Today, that bridge is often cut short. The feeling begins, and food is already near. The body barely has time to enter the waiting state before the waiting is ended. The result can be a strange loss of bodily contrast. A person may eat often enough to avoid hunger, but not feel truly well fed in a deeper sense. The body may be supplied, but not reset. It may be protected from emptiness, yet deprived of the ordinary transition that once gave fullness its place. This is why constant eating can feel dull rather than comforting. Fullness without previous hunger can feel like weight without relief. Intake without interval can feel like repetition without meaning. In the ancient human world, the body's signals were tied to action and environment. Hunger might have led to walking toward water, looking for plants, following tracks, returning to a remembered place, or waiting until conditions changed. It was part of a larger dialogue with the landscape. The stomach, the muscles, the senses, and the memory of the group all belong to the same problem. Where will food come from? And when will the world allow it? That question shaped the body long before modern mealtimes existed. It made the body flexible. It made energy storage important. It made patience biologically useful. It also made appetite a signal with depth. Appetite was not only the desire to eat, it was a sign that the body was preparing to receive something valuable after a period without it. When modern life answers appetite too quickly, the signal can become less clear. The body may ask softly, and the world responds loudly. Food arrives before the need has matured. Eating happens before the older sequence has unfolded. Over time, the person may no longer know whether they are hungry, tired, bored, anxious, scheduled, or simply surrounded by food. This confusion is not a personal failure. It is a mismatch between a body shaped in scarcity and a world shaped by constant access. The ancient body did not need perfect abundance to function. It needed movement between states. It needed the slow passage from use to need, from need to search, from search to food, from food to rest, and from rest back into use. Hunger was one doorway in that passage. When the doorway is always closed before it is fully reached, the body may feel as if something in its timing has been disturbed. The careful lesson is not that hunger should be pursued or that food should be feared. It is that ordinary hunger once had a place in the human cycle. It helped define when eating mattered. It gave the body a reason to shift into stored energy, attention, and readiness. It connected the inner condition of the body with the outer condition of the world. Eating every day can feel wrong when this connection is weakened, because the body may keep receiving food without passing through the older signal that made receiving feel complete. Beneath the modern schedule, the body may still expect hunger to speak before food answers. And when food answers too soon, too often, and too predictably, the ancient conversation between emptiness and nourishment becomes quieter. Until the body is full, but not fully settled, hunger becomes frightening when it is imagined as a sign that the body is already failing. But ordinary hunger is often something quieter. It is a signal that the body has entered a different phase. The last intake has been used for some time. The stomach is no longer carrying the same fullness. The blood and tissues are adjusting. Stored energy may begin to matter more. Attention may turn, softly or sharply, toward food. In the deep human past, this change was not unusual. It was one of the repeated passages of life. A body could feel hunger and still walk. It could feel hunger and still listen, remember, carry, gather, search, and wait. This ability was not separate from human survival. It was part of what allowed human beings to live in places where food did not appear by command. The ancient body had to understand hunger without being destroyed by the first touch of it. It had to treat hunger as information, not always as disaster. This is one of the most important differences between an older food world and the modern one. Today, food can answer before hunger has even finished forming. A person may eat at the first slight emptiness, or before any emptiness at all, because the hour says it is time, because food is visible, or because the day has trained the body to expect another intake. The signal is covered quickly. The body receives, but it may not have had enough time to move through the internal change that gave receiving its meaning. This is why eating every day can feel wrong in a subtle way. The wrongness is not necessarily in the food. It may be in the missing silence before the food. It may be in the absence of the old pause, the pause where the body recognized that it could continue for a while without immediate supply. For nearly 200,000 years, human life unfolded inside that pause again and again. The pause did not always leave bones or tools behind, but it shaped the living body. It taught the body to use what was stored. It taught the body that fullness was temporary, and so was emptiness. It taught the body to move between states instead of clinging to one state forever. In that rhythm, hunger helped mark the beginning of a transition. It said, the body has crossed from receiving into using. It said, the world has not given more yet. It said, wait, move, notice, remember. Modern life often makes that message unnecessary on the surface, but the body may still be built to hear it. When the message is always silenced early, the body can become strangely uncertain. It may no longer feel clear hunger. It may feel restlessness, heaviness, craving, tiredness, or a dull pull toward food that does not feel like true need. Eating then becomes less like answering a signal and more like maintaining a habit. The ancient conversation between the inside of the body and the outside of the world becomes reduced to a schedule. This does not mean that people should ignore hunger or force themselves into discomfort. It means that hunger has a history deeper than fear. In its ordinary form, hunger once belonged to a larger cycle of use: search, delay, return, and rest. It helped the body know where it was in time. It gave fullness a beginning. It gave eating a reason beyond availability. Without it, food can lose its place in the body's rhythm. A meal may arrive, but not feel like relief. Fullness may come, but not feel like completion. The body may be surrounded by nourishment and still feel oddly unsettled, because one of the oldest signals of timing has been pushed out of daily life. The careful truth is not that hunger is always good, or that constant food is always bad. The truth is that the human body was shaped in a world where hunger and eating were partners in a cycle. Hunger opened the space, food closed it for a while, then the body used, waited, and opened the space again. If that cycle is flattened into near constant intake, the body may still function, but something in its older rhythm becomes faint. And perhaps the discomfort people feel when eating every day is not a rejection of food, but a quiet sign that the body still remembers the value of the space before it. The ancient body did not stop living when food was absent. It changed its manner of living. That difference is quiet, but it is important. In a modern setting, the absence of food can feel like a mistake in the day, as if the normal order has been broken. But for most of human time, the space before eating was not an exception. It was a condition the body had to pass through again and again. Food might come later. It might come from a place farther away than expected. It might depend on weather, memory, group movement, animal behavior, or the slow readiness of plants. During that waiting, the body could not simply fall apart. It had to continue. It had to walk, watch, carry, listen, remember, and remain useful while the next source of energy was still uncertain. This is one of the deeper reasons constant eating can feel strange. The human body is not only built to receive, it is also built to endure the interval before receiving. When that interval disappears, a whole ancient capacity is left unused. In the older world, waiting was not empty time. It was a biological state. The body could begin to draw on what it had stored. It could adjust how much energy was spent. It could make movement more careful. It could make attention more focused on signs of food, water, shelter, and safety. These changes did not require spoken thought. They belonged to the body's older intelligence, the kind that works beneath language. A person did not need to say, "Now I am entering a different metabolic state." The body simply began to shift because the world had not yet given more. This ability to shift made human life possible in landscapes that were never fully obedient. A tree did not fruit because the body wanted it. A herd did not remain nearby because hunger had arrived. A river did not offer fish because the sun was high. The body had to wait inside a world that answered in its own time. Modern eating often removes that waiting before the body can fully enter it. Food arrives at the first sign of emptiness, or even before emptiness appears. The body receives fuel again, but it may not experience the older movement into patience, stored energy, and internal adjustment. Over many days, this can create a subtle sense of being constantly maintained but not truly renewed. The body is kept supplied, yet one of its old passages is blocked. It never fully crosses into need, so it never fully returns from need. It stays in a middle state, where food is present, but relief is weak. This may be why some people feel heavy after a day of regular eating, even when each meal seems ordinary. The body has not been asked to wait long enough for food to become an event. It has only been asked to process again. In the ancient beginning of humanity, waiting also shaped the meaning of effort. Movement before food was not exercise in the modern sense. It was part of living. The body used energy before energy returned. It followed paths, carried tools or gathered foods, looked for small signs and moved with others through space. The delay before eating connected the body to the world outside it. When food finally came, it entered a body that had spent, searched, and adjusted. The meal closed a cycle for a while. In modern life, eating can come before effort, during stillness, or after only a short gap from the last intake. The body may be given the ending without the beginning. It receives the reward without the older journey that once gave the reward its place. This does not mean the past was better, or that waiting should be forced into suffering. The careful point is that the human body's long history includes waiting as a normal part of its design. Waiting allowed stored energy to matter. It allowed hunger to become information. It allowed the body to move from fullness into lightness, from receiving into using, from using into seeking, and from seeking into eating again. If modern abundance removes waiting completely, the body may feel as if it has lost one of its oldest movements. Eating every day can then feel wrong, not because the body hates food, but because the body was shaped to live through the quiet space before food returned. Waiting changed the body before food ever arrived. It changed the pace of movement, the use of attention, the meaning of hunger, and the way energy was handled inside. In the modern world, waiting is often seen as a delay before the real thing. But in the older human world, waiting was part of the real thing. It was not separate from eating, it was the long approach to eating. A body that waited was already participating in the food cycle, even if nothing had yet entered the mouth. The body was using what it had stored. It was measuring effort against need. It was keeping the person alive while the outside world remained uncertain. This is one of the ancient abilities that becomes easy to forget when food is always near. The body can survive a gap because it is built with gaps in mind. It holds energy in different forms. It can release that energy when the next intake has not come. It can keep the brain supplied. This does not mean the body enjoys shortage, and it does not mean hunger should be treated carelessly. It means the ordinary space before food was not outside the design of human life. It was part of the design. For nearly 200,000 years, human bodies moved through days in which food and time did not always line up neatly. A person might have eaten well the day before, and less the next day. A group might have reached a useful place and found it changed. A season might have made one food easy and another food absent. The body needed to carry yesterday into today. It needed to turn stored energy into present ability. This ability is one reason human beings could cross landscapes, endure weather, and continue through uncertainty. The waiting body was not inactive. It was working in a quieter way. It was protecting energy where possible, spending energy where necessary, and keeping the person connected to signs of the world. Modern eating often shortens this quiet work. A small emptiness appears, and food covers it. A slight dip in energy appears, and another intake covers it. The body is kept from falling into danger, which is good, but it may also be kept from entering the older interval where internal adjustment becomes clear. The result can be a body that is constantly supplied but rarely allowed to complete a full cycle. It receives, digests, stores, and receives again. What it does less often is wait, release, lighten, and return. This missing movement can make daily eating feel oddly unsatisfying. Food is present, but the body does not feel deeply answered. Fullness arrives, but it does not feel like relief. Energy arrives, but it does not feel earned by a completed passage from need to return. In ancient conditions, waiting also gave food a different emotional weight, though not in the romantic sense. Food mattered because it ended uncertainty for a while. It meant the body could rest from searching. It meant stored energy could be protected again. It meant the group had something to share, prepare, or carry. The meal was not just intake. It was a temporary resolution between the body and the world. Modern food often removes that resolution by removing the uncertainty before it. The body may eat because the hour has arrived, because food is visible, because habit has begun, or because the mind wants comfort. But if no real waiting came before the meal may not close anything. It may only add to a state that was already supplied. This is where the ancient reason becomes clearer. The body was shaped not only by food itself, but by the spaces that surrounded food. It learned to use absence. It learned to bridge time. It learned to continue without immediate rescue. When modern life rescues the body from every ordinary pause, the body may lose contact with a basic rhythm of human survival. The point is not to reject modern security. Reliable food has reduced suffering in ways that matter deeply. The point is to understand why constant access can feel biologically strange. A body formed through cycles may not feel fully at home in a rhythm where one side of the cycle is almost erased. Eating every day can feel wrong because the waiting body still exists beneath the modern schedule. It still knows how to hold, release, endure, and return. And when it is never asked to wait, it may quietly feel that an ancient part of the cycle has been left unfinished. The ability to wait is one of the most easily overlooked parts of human biology. It leaves no dramatic mark on the body from the outside. It does not look like strength in the ordinary sense. Yet without it, the long human story could not have unfolded. A body that could only act when newly fed would have been fragile in the older world. It would have needed the land to answer immediately, and the land rarely answered that way. Food came through timing, effort, memory, chance, and cooperation. It could be delayed by weather, by distance, by season, by the movement of animals, by the failure of plants, or by the simple fact that a useful place had already been used. In that world, the body had to make waiting possible. It had to keep life moving while the next meal was still somewhere ahead. This is not a small detail. It is one of the ancient foundations beneath the modern feeling that constant eating can become too much. The body was not only shaped to enjoy food when food arrived, it was shaped to remain organized when food had not arrived yet. During a waiting period, the body does not become empty in a simple way. It begins to change its sources. What was stored after earlier eating can be released. What was held in the liver, muscles, and body fat can help carry the person forward. The pace of energy use can shift. Hunger can become more noticeable, but it can also become part of a wider state of attention. The body is no longer only receiving, it is using, it is drawing down. It is proving, quietly, that the last meal was not only for the moment it was eaten, but for the time after it. This older logic is easy to lose when meals and snacks arrive before any real interval is opened. Food keeps entering, but stored energy has less room to become part of the day. The body is asked to keep processing new intake, while one of its oldest abilities waits unused beneath the surface. Over time, that can make daily eating feel strangely incomplete. The person may be full, but not light, supplied, but not settled, fed, but not restored in the deeper rhythm that comes from moving through need and back again. In the ancient human beginning, waiting also trained the body to understand time. Food did not stand apart from the day. It was connected to what came before it and what followed after it. A meal after waiting meant that the body had crossed a gap. It had continued without immediate support. It had spent something, searched for something, and then received something. That sequence gave eating a clear place in the body's internal order. Modern life can remove the sequence. Eating may come before effort. Fullness may come before hunger. Another intake may come before the body has fully used what it already has. The result is not always sickness or crisis. Often it is only a low, blurred discomfort, a feeling that the body is being kept in one condition for too long. The ancient reason is therefore not a command to live like the past. It is a reminder that the body became human through alternation. It learned fullness because emptiness also existed. It learned storage because later was uncertain. It learned release because movement had to continue before the world gave more. It learned patience because food was powerful, but not always present. When modern abundance removes waiting almost completely, it may also remove the internal return that makes food feel complete. The body may still eat every day and remain safe, but somewhere beneath safety, an older rhythm may remain unfinished. It may be asking not for suffering, not for deprivation, and not for a return to danger, but for the simple recognition that eating once belonged to a cycle. The body waited, used, searched, received, rested, and began again. And when that cycle is flattened into constant arrival, the body may quietly remember that it was shaped not only by food, but by the long silence before food came back. The fixed meal is much younger than the body that now obeys it. This is easy to forget, because breakfast, lunch, and dinner can feel like natural divisions of the day, almost as if they have always existed. But they are not written into the deep beginning of the human body. They are cultural arrangements, shaped slowly by settlement, agriculture, work, religion, class, industry, artificial light, and the changing structure of daily life. Human biology is far older than the table clock. Before farming, before cities, before markets, before written schedules, the body already knew how to eat, store, wait, and continue. It did not need a named meal to begin digestion. It did not need the hour to tell it that energy had entered. It did not need 3 daily appointments with food in order to remain alive. The body's older logic was simpler and more flexible. Food came when it could be found, prepared, shared, or taken from the living world. The timing was not meaningless, but it was not fixed by the modern clock. It was shaped by daylight, season, movement, group needs, available foods, and the effort required to reach them. This matters because the modern person often mistakes a historical habit for a biological law. When a mealtime arrives, the body may be expected to eat whether it has completed the previous internal cycle or not. The schedule becomes stronger than the signal. The clock speaks louder than the stomach. And after years of this, eating every day at regular intervals can feel so normal that any deviation feels wrong, while the body's older capacity for intervals becomes almost invisible. In the long history of humanity, regular daily meals in the modern sense appeared very late. Farming made food storage more possible in some places, but it did not instantly create the modern rhythm. Cities, households, social ranks, labour patterns, and later industrial work helped organise eating into more predictable times. A worker's meal break, a school lunch, a family dinner, or a morning breakfast before scheduled labour are not fossils from the beginning of our species. They are recent forms of order built around social life. They can be useful, comforting, and necessary. They help families gather. They help workers plan. They help children and elders receive care. They make life more predictable. But usefulness does not mean ancientness. A pattern can be helpful and still be new. The human body, however, still carries systems shaped in a much older world, where food timing was not governed by social clocks. This is the quiet conflict at the centre of the question. The body may be living under a schedule that solved modern problems, while still carrying biological rhythms that began before those problems existed. For nearly 200,000 years, the body's deepest inheritance was not a neat division of the day into meals. It was the ability to manage uneven supply. It could take in energy when available, hold some for later, release it when needed, and keep moving through the uncertain space between intake and return. When fixed meals become the unquestioned rule, this older movement can be narrowed. The body may eat because the time has come, not because a cycle is completed. It may receive more because the culture expects eating, not because the internal rhythm has clearly shifted from storage to use and back toward need. This can create a subtle mismatch. The person may not be physically starving and may not be overeating in any dramatic way, yet still feel that daily eating carries a weight. The discomfort may come from living inside a pattern that is socially normal but historically unusual. The ancient body did not measure food by breakfast, lunch, and dinner. It measured food through need, opportunity, effort, absence, and return. The modern schedule can protect people from chaos, but it can also cover the old signals beneath routine. A meal may arrive before hunger becomes clear. Another may arrive before lightness returns. A snack may appear before the body is drawn from what it stored. Over time, food becomes less like an event and more like background noise. The old contrast fades. And perhaps the reason eating every day can feel wrong is that the body is not only responding to food itself, it is responding to the late arrival of a schedule laid over a biology that began in a world without one. The more settled human life became, the easier it became to imagine food as something that should return at expected times. Agriculture changed the relationship between people and food in a deep way, though not all at once, and not in the same way everywhere. When some human groups began planting crops, tending animals, storing harvests, and living for longer periods in one place, food became more connected to houses, fields, containers, and seasons of labor. This did not erase hunger. It did not make life easy. Crops could fail, stored food could spoil, animals could die, weather could break the rhythm of a year. But settlement did begin to move food away from the older pattern of constant movement across a wild landscape and toward a new pattern of repeated work, storage, and social order. The body was still ancient, but the environment around the body was changing. Food was becoming less only a discovery in the world and more a product of human planning. From that change, the later idea of regular meals became more possible. A stored harvest could be measured, grain could be kept, bread or porridge could be prepared from foods held over time. Herd animals could provide repeated sources of nourishment in some societies. Cooking places became more fixed, households became more central. Eating began to belong not only to hunger and opportunity, but also to rules, roles, labor, and daily structure. This is one of the important turns in the history behind the modern discomfort. The body's biology did not suddenly become new when people settled. The same body that had once waited for uncertain food was now living inside a world where food could sometimes be organized in advance. That brought protection, but it also began to place the body under schedules made by human systems rather than by direct bodily need. Over long periods, people learned to eat around work in fields, storage cycles, religious customs, social rank, and household duties. Food became part of order. In many places, meals began to mark the day, not because the body had always demanded those exact divisions, but because society needed shared times, repeated labor, and predictable care. The ancient body now had to live inside a cultural rhythm. This rhythm could be useful. A predictable meal can support children, elders, workers, and communities. It can reduce fear. It can turn food from uncertainty into comfort. But it can also teach the body to obey a pattern that did not come from its earliest history. The clock did not create hunger, but over time it can train expectation. A person may begin to feel hungry because a usual hour has arrived, because others are eating, because the room changes, because the workday pauses, or because the body has learned the routine. This learned hunger is not false, but it is different from the older hunger that rose from real absence after energy had been used. It is hunger shaped by culture. When this cultural hunger is repeated every day, the body may receive food before its deeper internal cycle has fully moved through storage, release, lightness, and renewed need. That is where the feeling of mismatch can grow. The modern meal schedule is not simply biological, it is historical. It carries traces of fields, villages, households, labor, bells, schools, factories, and later screens and artificial light. Each layer made eating more predictable, and each layer moved the body farther from the ancient world where food timing came from land and circumstance. For nearly 200,000 years, the human body had learned to manage uncertainty. Then, across a much shorter stretch of history, human societies built systems to reduce uncertainty. That was a remarkable achievement, but the body did not forget its older design. It still has signals for waiting. It still has systems for using stored energy. It still has a sense of contrast between emptiness and fullness, effort and rest, receiving and releasing. When life becomes too organized around repeated intake, that contrast may fade. Eating every day may then feel wrong not because regular meals are evil, and not because the past was pure, but because a young social structure is resting on top of a much older biological rhythm. The body is being asked to follow the history of civilization while still carrying the timing of a world before fixed meals existed. By the time food became organized around clocks, bells, work shifts, school days, and household routines, the human body had already carried a much older food rhythm for an immense length of time. The body did not wait for civilization to teach it how to manage energy. It had already learned to receive, store, release, endure, and begin again. What civilization changed was not the basic need for food, but the arrangement around food. Eating became easier to predict. It became attached to morning, midday, evening, labor, rest, family, class, religion, and later the mechanical clock. A meal was no longer only a response to hunger or opportunity. It became a social appointment, This change helped people live together. It made care more reliable. It allowed food to be shared at expected times. It gave structure to days that were increasingly shaped by farming, trade, work, and eventually industry. But from the view of deep human history, this structure arrived very late. The body that sits at a table 3 times a day is still carrying systems formed before tables, before fields, before written calendars, and before the day was divided by human institutions. This is why the fixed meal can feel both normal and strange at the same time. It is normal because culture has trained it into daily life. It is strange because the body's older rhythm was not built from the clock outward. It was built from changing need, changing effort, and changing access to food. In the ancient world, eating did not always divide the day into neat sections. The day divided eating. Light, temperature, movement, safety, season, distance, and social cooperation shaped when food could be found and used. A group might eat after successful gathering, after reaching a known place, after preparing what had been carried, or after returning from a search. The timing came from life itself. In the modern world, timing often comes first, and the body follows after. Breakfast may arrive because morning has a name. Lunch may arrive because work pauses. Dinner may arrive because evening is socially marked. These patterns are not meaningless, and for many people they are helpful. But they are not proof that the body was designed for constant fixed intake. They are proof that human societies learned to organize food. The ancient body had to live with uncertainty. The civilized body often lives with predictability. The difference between those two conditions is where the discomfort can begin. When food is tied to schedule, the body may be asked to eat before hunger becomes clear. It may be asked to receive before it has fully used what it already carries. It may be asked to repeat fullness because the day says it is time, not because the internal cycle has opened again. Over many years, this can make the body feel as if food is always arriving slightly too soon. Not always in a dramatic way, but in a quiet, bodily way. A person may feel full but not satisfied, fed but not light, regular but not balanced. The meal has arrived, but the older sequence has not completed itself. For nearly 200,000 years, the human body was shaped by intervals. It lived through the space between eating and eating again. It used stored energy because the next intake was not guaranteed. It allowed hunger to rise as a signal, not always as danger. It treated food as something that returned after time, effort, and condition. Modern fixed meals change the outer world faster than the body's deep inheritance could change. That does not make regular meals wrong. It does not mean the body should be forced into ancient hardship. It simply means the body may sometimes feel the pressure of a young routine placed over an old design. The ancient reason behind the discomfort is not that humans were meant to reject food. It is that humans were shaped before food became a daily appointment. The body still knows how to move between states, but modern life often holds it near one state for too long. Civilization gave food order. The body came from a world of cycles. And when those two histories meet inside one person, eating every day can begin to feel less like a natural law and more like a recent habit resting on something far older. A person may believe they eat because the body asks, but much of modern eating begins outside the body. It begins with a schedule, a work break, a family routine, a school bell, a meeting ending, a screen paused, a shop nearby, or the simple fact that everyone else is eating. The body still matters, of course. Hunger, appetite, fullness, tiredness, and memory all play their roles. But the timing of food is often no longer led by the ancient signals alone. It is led by society. This is a quiet change, but it reaches deeply into the question of why eating every day can feel wrong. For most of human history, the body met food through the world directly. The land changed, and the body responded. Food was tied to daylight, movement, season, water, plants, animals, tools, and the group's ability to find or prepare what was available. There was no universal hour that commanded the body to eat. The body's rhythm and the environment's rhythm were still closely joined. When food came, it came from an outside condition that had shifted into possibility. Modern life has replaced much of that older contact with social timing. A meal can now happen because the day has been divided in advance. The hour says breakfast, The workplace says lunch, the evening says dinner. The body may follow, even when its deeper signals are unclear. This does not make modern eating foolish. Social rhythms help people live together. They help families gather, workers rest, and children receive care. They create order in a world that would otherwise be difficult to manage. But order is not the same as biological origin. A schedule can protect the body and still pull it away from an older rhythm. The ancient human body was shaped by cycles of effort, absence, search, receiving, and rest. The modern social body is shaped by appointments. This difference can make food arrive before the inner cycle has reached the right moment. A person may eat because noon has come, not because the body has clearly moved from fullness into need. A person may snack because a break is available, not because stored energy has truly been used. A person may eat late because the social day has only then become quiet, even if the body is preparing for sleep. In this way, food becomes attached to roles and obligations rather than only to biological timing. The body becomes a passenger inside a social machine. For nearly 200,000 years, the human body did not begin its day by checking a clock. It began by meeting conditions. Light, temperature, distance, safety, and the presence or absence of food shape the day from the outside. Now the day is shaped by calendars, alarms, labor patterns, and artificial light. Food is placed into that structure, and the body is expected to adapt. It often does adapt, because the human body is flexible. But flexibility has a cost when the same pattern repeats without contrast. The stomach may receive food at the proper social hour, while the rest of the body is not fully asked for it. The mouth may eat because the situation invites eating. The mind may accept the routine. Yet beneath that routine, older systems may still expect a different order. Movement before intake, waiting before relief, need before fullness, darkness before rest. When these older cues are ignored for long enough, eating can begin to feel detached from the body itself. It becomes something that happens to the body, rather than something the body has clearly arrived at. The discomfort may be gentle, but it is real enough to notice. A person may feel heavy after a normal meal, restless after a snack, or oddly unsatisfied after eating at the correct time. The problem may not be the food alone. It may be the timing around the food. A body shaped by environment is now being fed by routine. A system built for cycles is now living by social commands. The ancient reason is not that daily meals are unnatural in a simple way. It is that the earliest human body learned food through contact with the world, while the modern body often receives food through contact with the clock. And when the clock becomes louder than hunger, louder than movement, louder than light and rest, the body may quietly feel that eating has lost its original place. Modern eating is not only shaped by hunger, it is shaped by the architecture of the day. A person may rise before the body has fully understood morning, because an alarm has already made the decision. Food may be taken quickly, not because appetite has clearly opened, but because work begins soon. Hours later, another meal may arrive because the schedule has created a narrow space for it. In the evening, food may return again because the day has ended socially, even if the body is tired, still, or preparing for sleep. In this pattern, meals become less like responses to the body and more like markers placed along a social path. The body is carried from one marker to the next. It learns to expect food because the world around it repeats the cue. This is very different from the older human situation, where the day did not bring food by appointment, the day brought conditions. There was light enough to move, or not. There was weather that allowed searching, or weather that made it harder. There were plants ready, or plants not ready. There were animals nearby, or animals elsewhere. The body's signals and the world's conditions had to meet. Hunger alone could not make food appear. The hour alone meant little. What mattered was whether the body, the group, and the landscape had reached a moment where eating became possible. Modern society changed that relationship by making food part of a human-made rhythm. Workplaces, schools, roads, shops, storage systems, electricity, and screens all help decide when eating happens. A person may feel hungry at the same time each day because the body has learned the social pattern. That hunger is real as an experience, but its roots may not be only biological need. It can be trained expectation. The body hears the clock because it has heard the clock for years. The stomach prepares because the environment has repeated the same signal again and again. This is not a failure. It is the body doing what bodies do, adapting to regular cues. But the ancient body was shaped by cues that were more directly tied to need, effort, and environment. When the cue becomes mostly social, the body may eat before the older internal cycle is fully opened. It may receive food because the external world says yes, even when the internal world is still unfinished. This can make regular eating feel strangely detached. The meal is correct by the schedule, but not clearly correct by the body. For nearly 200,000 years, human bodies lived without modern workdays, lunch breaks, late-night lighting, or food stored in permanent abundance. The body's older timing came from the slow conversation between energy and circumstance. It used what had been eaten before. It waited as the body moved. It felt hunger rise as a signal. It met food when the world allowed food to return. In modern life, that conversation can be interrupted by routine. A person may eat breakfast because morning has begun, even if the body is not ready. A person may eat lunch because the break is short, even if the body is still processing the earlier meal. A person may eat dinner because family, culture, or rest require a shared moment, even if the body's energy needs are unclear. These patterns are meaningful socially and often valuable. They help people connect, plan, and care for one another. But they also show how food can become separated from the older rhythm that formed the human body. The discomfort may come from that separation. Food enters, but the body has not traveled through enough absence. Fullness arrives, but it does not close a true interval. Eating happens, but the body does not feel that something ancient has been completed. Instead, it feels like another command in a day full of commands. The body is not only digesting food, it is digesting time. It is trying to fit ancient energy systems into modern schedules. When those schedules become too smooth, too frequent, and too detached from movement, light, rest, and real hunger, the body may quietly resist. Not with a dramatic refusal, but with heaviness, dullness, confusion, or a sense that food has become too present. The ancient reason is not that society is wrong to organize meals. It is that social rhythm is young, while biological rhythm is old. The body can learn the clock, but it was first shaped by the land. And when the clock feeds the body more often than the body's own cycle asks to be fed, eating every day can begin to feel like a rhythm borrowed from civilization, not one born from the body itself. A society can teach the body when to expect food. This is one of the quietest forms of training in modern life. The training does not feel forced because it is repeated gently every day. Morning begins and food becomes possible. Work pauses and food becomes expected. Evening arrives and food becomes part of rest, family, habit, or reward. After enough repetition, the body may begin to prepare before any deep hunger has appeared. The smell of food, the sight of a table, the sound of dishes, the end of a meeting, or the simple movement toward a familiar room can wake appetite, because the body has learned the pattern. This learned appetite is real. It belongs to the body's ability to adapt. But it is not the same as the older signal that rose from energy being used, stored fuel being drawn down, and the outside world not yet offering more. That older signal was connected to a whole chain of conditions. It belonged to movement, waiting, distance, and uncertainty. Modern social appetite often belongs to routine. This difference helps explain why eating every day can feel wrong even when nothing obvious is wrong with the food. The body may be responding to cues that are younger than the body's own design. It may be eating because civilization has arranged the moment, not because the ancient cycle has truly opened. For nearly 200,000 years, the human body was shaped in a world where timing came from the land before it came from people. Light and darkness mattered. Seasons mattered. Weather mattered. The location of water, animals, plants, shelter, and other people mattered. Food was part of a living pattern that the body had to enter with attention and effort. Then, much later, human societies created new patterns. They made bells, shifts, calendars, kitchens, stored supplies, markets, schools, restaurants, delivery systems, and screens. Each of these made food easier to place into the day. Each also made it easier for food to appear without the older path that once came before it. The body can adapt to this, but adaptation can create confusion when the outer rhythm becomes stronger than the inner one. A person may eat because the day says it is time, while the body still feels unclear. The meal may enter, but the body may not feel relief. Fullness may come, but not completion. The old sequence has been bypassed. There was no long enough pause, no real movement into need, no clear return from absence. There was only the arrival of another social signal. This is not a reason to reject shared meals or ordinary routines. Human beings are social animals, and food has always been tied to care, belonging, and cooperation. The ancient world also involved sharing, learning, and group timing, but the difference is scale and control. Older group eating still depended on what the world allowed. Modern group eating often depends on what the schedule commands. In that shift, the body's hunger can become less like a guide and more like a trained response. The body may learn to ask at certain times because those times have been rewarded again and again. It may also forget how to wait through ordinary emptiness without alarm. It may treat every social cue as a bodily need. Over time, food becomes woven into nearly every pause in the day. A break becomes a snack. A screen becomes a meal. A meeting ending becomes a drink. A late night becomes another intake. The body is surrounded by small invitations, and each invitation can weaken the older contrast between having and not having. The ancient reason behind the discomfort is now clearer. The body was first shaped by cycles of real availability, not by constant social permission. It learned to eat when food had been found, not simply when the hour had turned. It learned that hunger could lead into action, that waiting could have a purpose, and that fullness could close a passage for a while. Modern life often removes that passage. It places food at fixed points, whether the passage has happened or not. And when this continues day after day, eating every day can feel like living inside a rhythm that is orderly on the outside, but slightly misaligned within. The clock may be calm. The table may be full. The routine may be normal. Yet beneath it, the body may still belong to an older world, one where food was not a social command, but a changing answer from the land. The condition of always having food nearby is so familiar now that it can be mistaken for the natural human state. A person may pass through a day surrounded by food without noticing how unusual this is in the long view of human history. Food waits in kitchens, shops, bags, machines, boxes, drawers, and glowing images on screens. It can be bought before hunger becomes clear. It can be stored for days, weeks, or longer. It can be eaten after very little movement. It can appear late at night, far from daylight, weather, soil, animals, plants, and season. The body now lives in a world where food often seems less like an event and more like background. It is simply there. But this constant presence is not the world in which the human body first formed its rhythms. For nearly 200,000 years, the body lived closer to uncertainty. Food was not always absent, but it was not permanently present in the modern sense. It belonged to places that had to be reached, seasons that had to arrive, plants that had to grow, animals that had to move, water that had to remain available, and social groups that had to cooperate. The body was therefore shaped around changing access. It learned to expect difference. It learned that food could arrive, disappear, return, fail, or come in forms that required work before they could be eaten. The modern condition of constant access removes much of that difference. It keeps food close even when the body has not searched, waited, moved far, or fully used what it already carries. This does not make abundance bad. Abundance has protected people from forms of suffering that no one should romanticize. Reliable food can mean safety, care, childhood survival, recovery, and peace of mind. But a condition can be protective and still be new. The body can benefit from security while also feeling the strangeness of a world where absence has nearly vanished. That is the quiet tension at the center of this question. Eating every day may feel wrong not because food is wrong, but because food no longer leaves. The body is living inside a permanent nearness that its older systems did not begin with. In ancient environments, food had boundaries. A fruiting tree had a season. A shellfish bed had tides and limits. A hunted or scavenged animal had to be found, processed, shared, and used before it spoiled. Roots, seeds, nuts, fish, eggs, insects, meat and plant foods each came with their own timing and conditions. Even when people had skill and knowledge, food still belonged to the living world, and the living world never behaved like a storage room. Modern life has turned many foods into objects that wait silently for the person. The weather does not need to cooperate. The body does not need to walk far. The season may be hidden by transport and storage. The old connection between food and circumstance becomes faint. When this happens, eating can lose its sense of arrival. It no longer comes after enough absence to feel like return. It becomes one more available thing in a world of available things. The body may respond by feeling crowded, heavy, or strangely ungrateful for comfort that should feel simple. This feeling is not a failure of character. It may be a sign that the body still carries an ancient expectation of contrast. The body expects food to have a before and an after. It expects intake to be followed by use. It expects fullness to eventually give way to lightness. It expects stored energy to matter for a while before new energy arrives. Constant access can blur these stages into one continuous state. Food is near, so the body is invited to receive again. Food is visible, so appetite is awakened again. Food is easy, so waiting becomes unnecessary. The ancient cycle becomes shorter and thinner until it almost disappears. For the first humans, food was part of a changing relationship with the world. For the modern body, food can become and perhaps that is why abundance can sometimes feel less like freedom and more like quiet pressure. The body is not only asking whether there is food, it may also be asking whether there is still space around food, enough space for hunger to speak, for stored energy to be used, for lightness to return, and for eating to feel once again like an answer rather than a constant condition. Constant access to food changes more than the number of times a person eats. It changes the meaning of the whole day. When food is always near, hunger no longer has to guide movement in the same way. Waiting no longer has to deepen into attention. Fullness no longer has to arrive after real absence. The body may still digest, store, and use energy, but the older pattern around those processes becomes quieter. Food becomes less like a returning event and more like an atmosphere that surrounds the person. This is a very unusual condition for a body whose deep history began in places where food had to be met through the world. In older human environments, even familiar food sources were not permanently present. A place that gave fruit might later give nothing. A shoreline might offer food at one time and be difficult at another. An animal path might be useful one week and empty the next. A patch of edible roots might require memory, effort, digging, and the right season. The body learned to live with this changing access. It learned that food could come close, then move away. It learned that enough was temporary, and absence was also temporary. It learned to continue between these states. Modern abundance can quietly remove that lesson from daily life. The body wakes, and food is there. The body pauses, and food is there. The body feels bored, tired, social, distracted, or uneasy, and food is still there. This constant nearness can make eating feel less connected to need and more connected to availability. The person may not be answering hunger anymore. They may be answering presence. That distinction matters because the human body did not evolve only to process calories. It evolved to interpret timing. It reads the gap before food, the state after food, the use of energy between meals, and the return of appetite after stored energy has been spent. If food is always available, the body receives many invitations before its older signals have had time to form clearly. Appetite may rise because food is visible, not because the body has moved deeply into need. Eating may happen because the environment offers it, not because the internal cycle is ready. Over time, this can produce a strange feeling of being fed without being truly settled. The stomach may be full, but the body may not feel restored. The day may include enough intake, but not enough transition. For nearly 200,000 years, the human body was shaped in a world where availability was not constant. This does not mean every ancient life was defined by hunger, or that every group lacked reliable foods. Human societies were skilled, observant, and adaptive. They used tools, fire, memory, cooperation, and local knowledge to make food more available than it would have been for a lone animal. But skill did not turn the world into permanent supply. Even knowledge had to wait for seasons. Even tools had to meet opportunity. Even cooperation had to work within limits set by weather, distance, and living systems. So the body's design became flexible. It could receive abundance when abundance came. It could store for later. It could release when later arrived without new food. It could function through ordinary emptiness without treating every gap as collapse. Constant modern access changes the outer problem. It reduces uncertainty, but it also reduces the body's chance to practice the rhythm that uncertainty created. Food nearby can become a soft pressure because the body is always being invited toward intake. A cupboard, a package, a bright sign, a table, a delivery app, or a social moment can all become signals to eat before the body has truly crossed into hunger. The ancient relationship was different. Food had to appear as an answer from the world. Now food often appears before the question is fully asked. This is why eating every day can feel wrong in a way that is difficult to name. The body may not be protesting nourishment. It may be sensing that nourishment has lost its edges. There is no clear before. There is no clear after. There is only repeated availability, and a body shaped by cycles may feel uneasy when one of the oldest cycles is flattened into constant presence. The ancient body knew food as arrival after absence, relief after waiting, and energy after uncertainty. The modern body often knows food as something already there, waiting quietly before hunger has spoken. Constant access to food changes more than the number of times a person eats. It changes the meaning of the whole day. When food is always near, hunger no longer has to guide movement in the same way. Waiting no longer has to deepen into attention. Fullness no longer has to arrive after real absence. The body may still digest, store, and use energy, but the older pattern around those processes becomes quieter. Food becomes less like a returning event and more like an atmosphere that surrounds the person. This is a very unusual condition for a body whose deep history began in places where food had to be met through the world. In older human environments, even familiar food sources were not permanently present. A place that gave fruit might later give nothing. A shoreline might offer food at one time and be difficult at another. An animal path might be useful one week and empty the next. A patch of edible roots might require memory, effort, digging, and the right season. The body learned to live with this changing access. It learned that food could come close, then move away. It learned that enough was temporary, and absence was also temporary. It learned to continue between these states. Modern abundance can quietly remove that lesson from daily life. The body wakes, and food is there. The body pauses, and food is there. The body feels bored, tired, social, distracted, or uneasy, and food is still there. This constant nearness can make eating feel less connected to need and more connected to availability. The person may not be answering hunger anymore. They may be answering presence. That distinction matters because the human body did not evolve only to process calories. It evolved to interpret timing. It reads the gap before food, the state after food, the use of energy between meals, and the return of appetite after stored energy has been spent. If food is always available, the body receives many invitations before its older signals have had time to form clearly. Appetite may rise because food is visible, not because the body has moved deeply into need. Eating may happen because the environment offers it, not because the internal cycle is ready. Over time, this can produce a strange feeling of being fed without being truly settled. The stomach may be full, but the body may not feel restored. The day may include enough intake, but not enough transition. For nearly 200,000 years, the human body was shaped in a world where availability was not constant. This does not mean every ancient life was defined by hunger, or that every group lacked reliable foods. Human societies were skilled, observant, and adaptive. They used tools, fire, memory, cooperation, and local knowledge to make food more available than it would have been for a lone animal. But skill did not turn the world into permanent supply. Even knowledge had to wait for seasons. Even tools had to meet opportunity. Even cooperation had to work within limits set by weather, distance, and living systems. So the body's design became flexible. It could receive abundance when abundance came. It could store for later. It could release when later arrived without new food. It could function through ordinary emptiness without treating every gap as collapse. Constant modern access changes the outer problem. It reduces uncertainty, but it also reduces the body's chance to practice the rhythm that uncertainty created. Food nearby can become a soft pressure because the body is always being invited toward intake. A cupboard, a package, a bright sign, a table, a delivery app, or a social moment can all become signals to eat before the body has truly crossed into hunger. The ancient relationship was different. Food had to appear as an answer from the world. Now food often appears before the question is fully asked. This is why eating every day can feel wrong in a way that is difficult to name. The body may not be protesting nourishment. It may be sensing that nourishment has lost its edges. There is no clear before. There is no clear after. There is only repeated availability. And a body shaped by cycles may feel uneasy when one of the oldest cycles is flattened into constant presence. The ancient body knew food as arrival after absence, relief after waiting, and energy after uncertainty. The modern body often knows food as something already there, waiting quietly before hunger has spoken. The modern body lives inside a kind of food nearness that most earlier humans would not have recognized. This nearness is not only physical, it is also visual, social, emotional, and habitual. Food is not merely in the room. It is in the image, the advertisement, the celebration, the break, the reward, the comfort, the evening routine, and the small pauses between tasks. It surrounds the body even when the body has not truly entered hunger. This is one of the most unusual changes in the long story of human eating. In the older world, food had to cross a distance before it reached the person. It had to come through land, season, skill, luck, memory, and effort. It had to be found, gathered, caught, processed, carried, shared, or prepared. Modern food often crosses that distance before the body has done anything at all. It waits nearby, already separated from the living conditions that produced it. The body receives the final result without the older path that once gave eating its place. This does not make modern food false, and it does not mean abundance should be rejected. It simply means the body is living under a condition that is historically new, food as permanent presence. For nearly 200,000 years, the body's deeper rhythms were shaped by absence and return. Food appeared, then it disappeared. Fullness came, then it faded. Stored energy was built, then drawn upon. Hunger rose, then was answered when the world allowed an answer. This cycle gave the body a sense of timing. It allowed internal states to separate from one another. The body could know the difference between being fed, being light, being empty, being ready, and being restored. Constant access blurs these differences. If food is always near, the body is often invited to receive before it has fully shifted into need. If eating happens too often, fullness may never fade enough to become meaningful again. If absence is always prevented, the return of food loses some of its force. The person may eat every day and still feel that eating has become strangely flat. The body is not deeply relieved, it is simply filled again. This may be one reason constant food can create quiet pressure. The pressure does not always come from hunger. It can come from too many signals. The body sees food, smells food, thinks about food, plans food, passes food, hears others mention food, and learns that nearly every pause can be answered by food. The old silence around eating becomes rare, yet the ancient body was not formed inside continuous invitation. It was formed inside a world where opportunity had edges. A ripe plant did not remain forever. A successful hunt did not repeat by command. A useful shoreline still belonged to tide and weather. A stored food could spoil, be taken, or run out. Food had limits, and those limits shaped the body's sense of enough. Modern life often hides the limit. There is more after this meal, more after this snack, more tomorrow, more in the next shop, more in the next image. The body is safe from many old dangers, but it may also lose the clear boundary that once helped it stop, wait, and reset. The ancient reason behind the discomfort is therefore not only irregular eating, it is the loss of edges around food. Eating every day feels wrong when food becomes a constant background instead of a meaningful event. The body may continue to function, but its older rhythm is weakened. It receives without enough absence. It stores without enough release. It tastes without enough waiting. It becomes full without the deep contrast that once made fullness feel complete. This is not a simple argument against regular meals. It is a slower recognition that the body's first world did not contain permanent availability. Human biology began in changing landscapes, where food had to arrive through time and condition. Modern abundance has made food safer, closer, and more predictable, but it has also made it harder for the body to feel the ancient cycle of need, search, return, and rest. And when that cycle grows faint, the body may quietly ask for something that modern life rarely gives it. Not more food, not less food as a rule, but space around food, so that eating can once again feel like an answer instead of an atmosphere. The feeling of being heavy after eating is not always the same as being overfed. Sometimes it is quieter than that. It can feel like the body has been covered from the inside, as if movement has slowed before the day has truly asked for rest. A person may have eaten a normal meal, followed the expected rhythm, done nothing extreme, and still feel a dull weight beneath the ribs, in the limbs, or in the mind. The body is supplied, but not light. It is full, but not peaceful. It has received food, yet the receiving does not feel like restoration. This strange middle state is one of the clearest modern signs of a rhythm that has lost its old contrast. In the deep human past, fullness was not usually floating by itself. It came after something. It came after movement, after delay, after searching, after uncertainty, after the body had drawn from what it stored and crossed some distance between need and return. Because of that, fullness could mean relief. It could mean the body had reached a point where the search could pause. It could mean effort had found an answer. In modern life, fullness can arrive without that older journey. Food may come before hunger is clear, before stored energy has been used, before the body has moved enough to make intake feel like completion. The result is not always comfort. Sometimes it is thickness. Sometimes it is sleepiness without true rest. Sometimes it is the sense that eating has added something, but has not resolved anything. For nearly 200,000 years, the human body was shaped by a world where internal states had room to separate. Hunger could rise. Effort could spend energy. Waiting could deepen. Food could arrive. Fullness could settle. Then, over time, the body could become light again. These states did not have to be perfect or pleasant, but they were distinct. The modern food environment often compresses them. Hunger is answered early. Meals are repeated by schedule. Snacks appear between meals. Drinks with energy enter without being treated as meals. Food is present in moments of boredom, stress, celebration, fatigue, and habit. The body is asked to receive again before it is clearly returned from the previous receiving. Under that pattern, heaviness may be the feeling of a cycle being crowded. It is not a dramatic biological crisis. It is a low signal that the body is being held near the fed state for too long. A system built to shift may feel dull when the shift is delayed again and again. The ancient body did not know food as permanent nearness. It knew food as something that changed the day. After enough absence, food had force. After effort, food had place. After waiting, food had meaning. The modern body can lose those conditions and still eat, but the eating may feel strangely unfinished. Fullness without prior emptiness can feel like pressure. Energy without prior use can feel like burden. A meal without a clear before can lack a clear after. This is why the discomfort is difficult to name. It is not simple hunger. It is not simple fullness. It is a body caught between signals, not empty enough to search, not satisfied enough to rest, not light enough to move freely, not hungry enough to make food meaningful. The feeling may also show up in the mind. After repeated eating, attention can become slow. The day can feel softened at the edges. The body may want to lie down, not because it has completed a cycle, but because it has been asked to process again. In older conditions, rest after food belonged to a wider rhythm of expenditure and return. In the modern setting, rest after food may come after long sitting, screen time, and another scheduled meal. The body receives rest and food, but not necessarily the older alternation that made them feel complete. This does not mean every meal must follow effort or that heaviness has only one cause. Human bodies are different, and many factors can shape digestion, energy, and comfort. The careful point is that a recurring sense of heaviness can be understood historically, not only personally. It may reflect the loss of internal movement between states. Eating every day can feel wrong when food arrives so regularly that the body rarely reaches the lightness before food, the readiness before intake, or the relief after return. The ancient reason is not a hidden rule against eating. It is the memory of a rhythm in which the body was allowed to empty a little, use what it carried, wait, and then receive. Without that rhythm, the modern body may keep being fed, while still quietly feeling that something has not been completed. A slow body is not always a tired body. Sometimes it is a body that has been asked to stay too close to fullness for too long. The feeling can appear after repeated ordinary eating, not after a feast, not after a mistake, but after a day that seems completely normal. The person eats because morning has begun, eats because the workday pauses, eats because evening has arrived, and perhaps takes in small foods or drinks between those moments. Each intake may be modest, and each may seem harmless by itself. Yet by the end of the day, the body may feel covered in a soft weight. Movement becomes less inviting, thought becomes less clear, the stomach may not hurt, but the whole body feels less open. This is the kind of discomfort that makes the question feel personal. Why can a body surrounded by food feel less alive after receiving it? One careful answer begins with the loss of transition. The ancient body was shaped by movement between conditions. It did not remain always empty, and it did not remain always full. It moved from using to needing, from needing to searching, from searching to eating, from eating to resting, and then back into use. This movement gave each state a place. Hunger had a place because it pointed toward change. Fullness had a place because it followed absence. Lightness had a place because the body had finished processing and had returned to readiness. Modern eating can shorten or erase the lightness. Food comes again before the body has fully arrived there. The body may still digest and store and regulate, but the felt rhythm becomes crowded. It is like a path where each step begins before the previous step has landed. For nearly 200,000 years, the human body had to keep working through gaps. Those gaps were not always long or dangerous, but they were real enough to shape the body's sense of timing. Stored energy mattered because new energy was not always present. Movement mattered because food had to be reached. Waiting mattered because the world did not respond instantly. When food finally entered, it belonged to a larger sequence. Today, a person may eat while sitting, then remain sitting, then eat again because the schedule turns. The body receives without having travelled very far through its older states. This can produce a dull kind of fatigue, not the clean tiredness that follows effort, but the blurred tiredness that follows internal busyness. Digestion itself requires work. So does sorting incoming energy, sending signals, storing what is not needed, and balancing the body's internal chemistry. When these processes are repeated without much pause, the body may feel occupied from within. The person may say they feel sluggish, but what they may be sensing is not simple weakness. It may be the heaviness of a system that has not been allowed to clear the space between one intake and the next. In the older human world, food was often followed by time. Time to use it, time to move with it, time to let fullness fade into readiness, time to let appetite return with meaning. Modern life can compress this into a sequence of scheduled arrivals. Breakfast does not always wait for real hunger. Lunch does not always wait for the earlier meal to become fully used. Dinner does not always wait for the body's need to speak clearly. Food becomes punctual, but the body's deeper rhythm may be slower than the clock. This mismatch can make the body feel as if it is always processing yesterday's signal while today's signal is already entering. The ancient reason behind the heaviness is therefore not a simple rule about eating less or eating more. It is the older need for completed movement between states. A body that never becomes truly light may also never feel truly restored. A meal that never follows enough waiting may never feel like relief. A day that never contains enough space around food may become a day where the body is constantly supplied and quietly burdened. Eating every day can feel wrong when the body is not given the silence after food. the return of lightness, and the slow readiness that once came before food mattered again. The body often speaks softly when its rhythm is crowded. It does not always send pain. It does not always send a clear refusal. More often, it sends a slower signal: heaviness after ordinary food, a blurred mind after repeated intake, a sense of being full but not renewed, a desire to rest that does not feel like true rest. These feelings are easy to ignore because they are not dramatic. They can be explained away as a long day, a bad night, an aging body, a stressful routine, or simply the normal weight of life. Sometimes those things are involved. The body is never shaped by one cause alone. But when the same dull feeling returns again and again after regular eating, it may be useful to see it through the longer history of the human body. For nearly 200,000 years, human bodies did not live inside a pattern of constant supply. They lived inside changing states. Food came, food faded, stored energy was used, hunger rose, movement continued, and food returned when the world allowed it. The body's inner systems learned to expect those changes. They learned that fullness was not meant to last forever. They learned that lightness after fullness mattered. They learned that stored energy was not simply a backup for disaster, but part of ordinary daily function. When modern life keeps food near and intake frequent, the body may lose access to that older wave. It may never move far enough from fullness to feel clear. It may never experience hunger long enough for food to become meaningful. It may never fully shift from receiving to releasing before it is asked to receive again. This is where the feeling of heaviness becomes more than a digestive detail. It becomes a sign of interrupted transition. The body is not only carrying food, it is carrying unfinished states. A meal comes before the previous state has faded. A snack comes before lightness has returned. A drink with energy comes before the body has drawn from what it already holds. The result can be a life where the body is constantly managed, constantly supplied, constantly protected from emptiness, yet rarely allowed to complete the simple ancient cycle of enough, use, waiting, and return. In older human environments, this cycle was not an idea. It was the ordinary shape of survival. A person could not remain in the fed state by decision alone. The land did not permit it. Weather, season, distance, and uncertainty created pauses. Those pauses made the body use what it carried. They gave appetite a place to rise. They gave food a place to return. Modern abundance removes many dangers from that older pattern, and that protection should be respected, but it also removes many pauses. Without pauses, food can become strangely flat. It arrives without relief. It fills without completing. It comforts for a moment, then leaves the body feeling slow. This is why eating every day can feel wrong even when eating is safe, normal, and socially expected. The discomfort may not be an argument against food. It may be the body asking for a rhythm that includes more than intake. It may be asking for the part after food, when the body uses what came in. It may be asking for the part before food, when hunger becomes clear enough to guide timing. It may be asking for the return of contrast, where fullness can be felt because emptiness had space to exist. The ancient reason is not that humans were meant to live in constant hunger. That would be false. The ancient reason is that humans were shaped by movement between internal conditions, and modern eating often holds the body too close to one side of that movement. A body held near fullness can begin to feel like a room with no open window. Nothing terrible has happened, but the air does not move. The older rhythm was more like weather. It changed. It cleared. It returned. It gave the body moments of receiving, moments of spending, moments of waiting, and moments of renewed need. When that internal weather is flattened, the body may become heavy not because one meal is wrong, but because the larger pattern has lost its motion. And perhaps that quiet heaviness is one of the clearest traces of the old human food cycle still speaking from beneath the modern day. There are memories the body carries without remembering them as stories. They are not pictures of ancient landscapes or thoughts from people who lived before us. They are patterns preserved in how the body responds, adjusts, prepares, and protects itself. A body does not need to know the history of hunger in order to react to absence. It does not need to understand archaeology in order to store energy after food arrives. It does not need to imagine an old shoreline, a dry season, or a long walk through open land in order to shift between receiving and using. These responses are older than explanation. They are written in systems that work quietly beneath awareness: appetite, digestion, energy storage, energy release, fatigue, alertness, heaviness, and the changing sense of need. This is why the feeling that eating every day is somehow wrong can be difficult to explain. The mind may have no clear reason. The world may say that daily eating is normal. The schedule may be reasonable. The food may be ordinary. Yet the body may still feel that something in the rhythm is not fully settled. That feeling may come from a kind of biological memory, not a memory of events, but a memory of conditions. For nearly 200,000 years, the human body lived under conditions where food was powerful, because it was not permanently present. The body learned that abundance could come, but it could also fade. It learned that fullness was temporary, hunger was temporary, and the space between them mattered. It learned that energy had to be carried through time. It learned that the future could not always be fed from the present moment. These lessons were not learned by the conscious mind in the modern sense. They were built into the body through survival across generations. A person today does not inherit the exact meals of earlier humans, but the body inherits systems shaped by the same broad problem: how to remain alive when food does not arrive continuously. Modern abundance does not erase those systems. It only changes the world around them. The body still stores because later may matter. It still releases because movement may continue before new food comes. It still sends hunger because timing has changed. It still responds to fullness because intake has arrived. It still depends on contrast to know where it is in the cycle. When food is always close, these old responses may be asked to live inside a world that no longer gives them their original space. The result can be subtle confusion. Hunger may not be clear because it is interrupted too early. Fullness may not be satisfying because it did not follow enough need. Fatigue may appear because the body is repeatedly processing food without enough internal pause. Appetite may rise from cues outside the body rather than from a completed cycle inside the body. None of this requires imagining that ancient people had one perfect way of eating. They did not. Human groups were varied, and their diets and rhythms changed across place, season, climate, and culture. The careful point is not that the past gives us a single rule. The point is that the body's older systems were shaped by variation itself. They were shaped by a world where food came and went, where the body had to adjust, and where waiting was part of life. That variation may still echo in the modern body as a need for rhythm. Not a strict rule, not a harsh discipline, but rhythm. A body may feel more understandable when fullness is allowed to fade, when hunger is allowed to speak in ordinary ways, when food arrives as an answer rather than a constant background, and when eating belongs to a cycle instead of an endless line. This is the quiet meaning of biological memory. It does not speak in words, it speaks through timing. It speaks when the body feels heavy without being sick, when food is present but relief is missing, when the day is full of eating yet strangely empty of satisfaction. The ancient body is not asking the modern person to return to danger. It is not asking for scarcity. It is not asking for suffering. It may only be showing that safety and rhythm are not the same thing. A world full of food can protect life, but the body may still need the old movement between states in order to feel at home inside itself. Eating every day can feel wrong because the body carries more history than the schedule can see. Beneath the modern meal, beneath the clock, beneath the stored food and the easy access, there is an older pattern still working quietly. Receive, hold, use, wait, return. And when that pattern is covered for too long by constant intake, the body may not protest loudly. It may simply become unclear, heavy, and restless, as if remembering a rhythm it cannot fully name. The body's oldest memory is not a clear image. It is a set of expectations. It expects that food will change the internal state. It expects that after food, there will be time to use what has arrived. It expects that fullness will fade, that stored energy will become useful, that hunger will return as a signal, and that food will eventually come back. These expectations are not conscious thoughts. They are not personal memories. They are patterns built into the living system through a long history of facing irregular supply. This is why the body can sometimes feel confused in a world where food is always available. The mind sees safety. The body feels sameness. The mind sees convenience. The body feels a rhythm without enough space. The mind sees an ordinary day of eating. The body may feel that the old sequence has been interrupted again. For nearly 200,000 years, human bodies were shaped in environments where food could not be separated from time. What was eaten mattered, but so did when it appeared, how long it had been absent, how much movement came before it, and what the body had already used. The body learned to treat food as part of a moving cycle. It learned that a meal was not just an object entering the mouth, but a change in the whole condition of the body. After food, the body could store. After waiting, it could release. After effort, it could receive. After enough, it could rest. Modern life can flatten these differences into repeated intake. The body eats, but the surrounding phases are shortened. It receives again before it is fully released. It becomes full again before lightness has returned. It answers appetite before the signal has become clear. Over time, this can make the body feel less like a living rhythm and more like a system kept busy by constant arrivals. The ancient memory beneath this is not a desire for hunger itself. It is a memory of alternation. A body formed through alternation may feel unsettled when alternation disappears. It may not know how to explain that feeling. It may only send heaviness, dull appetite, restless craving, slow energy, or a sense that eating is happening without becoming satisfying. In older conditions, the environment helped create pauses. There were natural limits around food. Plants were seasonal, animals moved, weather changed access, distance mattered. Food had to be prepared, shared, or carried. These limits were often hard, and no one should turn them into a fantasy. But they also gave the body clear edges. There was a time before food, there was a time after food. There was a difference between having and not having. The modern world has softened those edges until food can exist almost outside time. It can be eaten when the body is not deeply hungry. It can be eaten when the day is stressful. It can be eaten when the mind is bored. It can be eaten simply because it is near. The body's biological memory may then struggle to locate where it is in the cycle. Is it receiving? Is it using? Is it waiting? Is it preparing? The answer becomes blurred. This blur may be one reason eating every day can feel wrong. Not because daily eating is automatically harmful, and not because ancient life gives a perfect model, but because the body's ancient systems still depend on contrast to make sense of food. Without contrast, food can lose its place. Hunger can become faint or anxious. Fullness can become heavy rather than complete. Appetite can be pulled outward by cues instead of rising inward from need. The body may continue to function, but it may feel less clearly guided by itself. This is the quiet power of biological memory. It does not tell the body to return to the past. It only reminds the body that it was shaped by a world where food had boundaries, where waiting had meaning, and where eating was one movement in a larger pattern. Modern abundance has changed the outside world faster than the deeper body could forget its older rhythm. So when the body feels uneasy around constant meals, it may not be making a dramatic claim. It may simply be sensing that food has become too continuous, too available, too detached from the ancient cycle that once gave nourishment its shape. The body does not need a story in order to carry history. It carries history through patterns that repeat beneath awareness. It carries it in the way appetite rises, in the way fullness fades, in the way energy is stored after food and released when food has not returned. It carries it in the discomfort that appears when a rhythm becomes too smooth, too crowded, too far from the alternating conditions that shape the body in the first place. This is why biological memory is not a poetic idea only. It is a practical way of understanding why the modern body can feel strange inside abundance. The body is not remembering a single ancient meal. It is responding with systems formed across long exposure to uncertainty. For nearly 200,000 years, human life unfolded in environments where food had to be encountered through time, effort, place, and condition. Food was powerful because it had edges. It could appear, disappear, return, fail, be shared, be carried, be preserved for a while, or be lost. The body learned to live with these edges. It learned that enough was not permanent, It learned that emptiness was not always danger. It learned that after eating there should be time for using, and after using there should be time for wanting again. Modern life often removes these edges. Food can be present before hunger speaks. It can be present after fullness has not yet faded. It can be present when the body is still, distracted, worried, tired, or socially invited. The result is a world where food is safer and closer, but also less clearly placed inside the body's older rhythm. This is where the unease begins. A person may eat normally and still feel unclear. They may follow the ordinary daily pattern and still feel heavy. They may not be hungry, yet not feel satisfied. They may not be empty, yet not feel calm. These are not always signs of one specific problem. They are softer than that. They may be traces of a body whose ancient timing has been blurred. The body expects movement between states, but the modern day may keep it near one state. It expects fullness to change into lightness, but food may return before lightness fully arrives. It expects hunger to become a meaningful signal, but hunger may be covered early by habit, schedule, or availability. It expects food to answer a cycle, but food often begins the cycle again before the previous one has closed. In older human conditions, the world itself helped protect the rhythm. Distance created pauses. Season created limits. Preparation required time. Movement used energy before food returned. Social sharing gave food meaning, but even sharing depended on what had actually been found. The body and the world were not separate in the way they often feel today. Eating came from a relationship with the outside. Modern food can arrive without that relationship being felt. The body receives nourishment, but not always the sequence that once surrounded nourishment. This does not mean the past was healthier, purer, or simpler. It means the body became human inside change, and change gave food its shape. The ancient reason behind the discomfort is therefore not a strict rule about how often a person should eat. It is a reminder that the body's deepest systems were shaped by alternation, receiving and releasing, fullness and lightness, hunger and return, storage and use, waiting and relief. When these movements are shortened or erased, eating can become strangely disconnected from restoration. The body may keep accepting food because food is necessary, but acceptance is not the same as balance. A body can be fed and still feel crowded. It can be safe and still feel rhythmically confused. It can live in comfort and still carry signals from a much older arrangement of life. Biological memory does not speak loudly. It does not say that every modern meal is wrong. It only suggests that the body still needs time around food for food to make sense. Time before it, time after it, time for the inner tide to move. And when that tide is held still by constant intake, the body may quietly remind us that nourishment was never only the act of eating, but the whole movement from need to waiting, to receiving, to using, and back again. The body is often blamed for feeling wrong in the modern world. It is called weak when it feels tired, undisciplined when it wants food, difficult when it feels heavy, and confused when hunger and fullness no longer speak clearly. But perhaps the body is not the thing that has failed. Perhaps the body is doing what an old body knows how to do, inside a world that has changed faster than its deepest rhythms can follow. This shift in view matters. It softens the question. Eating every day may feel wrong not because the body is broken, but because the environment around eating has become historically unusual. The body was shaped through cycles, but modern life often gives it continuity. The body was shaped through intervals, but modern life often removes them. The body was shaped through effort before food, but modern food often arrives before effort has happened. The body was shaped through absence and return, but modern abundance makes food feel permanently present. When these differences gather together, discomfort becomes understandable. It is not a moral failure. It is not proof that the body hates nourishment. It is a sign that an ancient system is living in a new arrangement. For nearly 200,000 years, the human body had to make sense of food through changing conditions. It had to use what was available, hold energy for later, move through uncertainty, and respond when food returned. These abilities are not flaws. They are strengths. The body stores energy because the future once mattered in a very practical way. It sends hunger because timing matters. It feels fullness because intake changes the internal state. It becomes light again because fullness was never meant to be permanent. It can wait because waiting was part of survival. The modern world often treats these older movements as inconveniences. Hunger is interrupted before it can become clear. Lightness is avoided because it can feel like lack. Waiting is treated as a problem. Food is offered before the body has fully asked. In such a world, the body may appear unreliable, but it may simply be carrying older logic. The mismatch is not inside the body alone. It is between the body and the conditions surrounding it. A person sitting beneath artificial light, eating by schedule, surrounded by stored food, moving less than earlier humans moved, and receiving constant cues to eat is not living in the same food world that shaped human biology. The body can adapt, but adaptation does not erase history. It may learn the clock, but it still responds to cycles. It may accept repeated meals, but it still knows the difference between receiving and releasing. It may live in safety, but it still carries systems formed in uncertainty. This is why the discomfort can feel so quiet and so persistent. The body is not screaming, it is negotiating. It is trying to fit ancient timing into modern convenience. It is trying to process food that arrives through culture, not through landscape. It is trying to find rhythm inside abundance. The useful lesson is not to condemn modern life. Reliable food has protected people from hunger, fear, and instability. Regular meals can bring care, community, and health for many people. A truthful story must hold that clearly. But it must also admit that the body's needs are not only about supply, they are also about sequence. The body may need food, but it may also need time before food and time after food. It may need the chance for fullness to fade, for stored energy to be used, for hunger to become ordinary information, and for eating to feel like part of a completed movement. When those chances disappear, the body may feel wrong because the world around it has become too smooth. The ancient reason is not that humans were meant to suffer. It is that humans were shaped in an environment where change itself organized life. Modern abundance removed many dangers, but it also removed many natural boundaries. The body did not become defective because those boundaries vanished. It became displaced. It is still an old body, carrying old timing under new conditions. And when eating every day feels wrong, the first kind answer may be this: the body is not betraying the person. It may be reminding the person that nourishment has always meant more than having food nearby. A modern person can feel trapped between two truths. Food is necessary and food is everywhere. The first truth is ancient. The second is new. The body cannot ignore food because food is part of life itself. It repairs, fuels, warms, builds, and protects. But the body also cannot fully forget the conditions that shaped its relationship with food. It still carries a rhythm older than kitchens, stores, alarms, schedules, and constant light. This is why the problem should not be framed as the body against food. That would be too simple. The deeper tension is between an old body and a new food world. The old body expects change. The new food world offers continuity. The old body expects intervals. The new food world shortens them. The old body expects hunger to have a voice. The new food world often answers before that voice becomes clear. When a person feels heavy, slow, or strangely unsettled after eating every day, the feeling may not mean that eating itself is wrong. It may mean the body is being asked to live without enough contrast. For nearly 200,000 years, the human body was shaped by conditions that required energy to be managed across time. Food came in many forms and in many patterns, but it did not exist as permanent background in the way it often does now. The body learned to receive when food appeared, to store what could be held, to release what had been stored, and to keep going when the next intake had not yet returned. These are not primitive flaws. They are intelligent biological solutions to an uncertain world. Modern abundance solves one part of that uncertainty, but it can accidentally disturb the rhythm those solutions were built for. The body may be safer, but less clearly timed. It may be fed, but less often allowed to move through the full sequence of need, use, waiting, and return. This is not a rejection of civilization. It is a way of seeing the body with more patience. Modern life asks the body to adapt to many things at once. Less movement before food, more food cues during rest, artificial light that stretches the day, social schedules that decide eating times, and stored foods that remove season and distance from the meal. The body can survive these changes because human beings are flexible. But flexibility is not the same as silence. The body may adapt and still send small signals that something in the pattern feels crowded. A person may eat because the hour has arrived, but the body may not have reached hunger. A person may feel full because food has entered, but the body may not feel restored because nothing was completed. A person may follow a normal routine and still feel that food has become too present. In that moment, the body is not failing. It is describing a mismatch. The ancient body understood nourishment through a larger order. Food belonged with movement, waiting, effort, social sharing, rest, and time. It was not only a substance, it was a stage in a cycle. Modern eating can separate food from that cycle and still call it normal. It can place food into the day without asking whether the body has finished the previous phase. It can make eating frequent, easy, and socially expected, while the deeper body waits for a rhythm that never fully returns. The discomfort that follows may be quiet, but it is meaningful. It suggests that the body needs more than calories arriving on time. It needs a sense of timing that matches its internal movements. It needs the space for fullness to fade. It needs the chance for stored energy to be used. It needs ordinary hunger to become understandable rather than feared. It needs food to arrive as part of a sequence, not as a constant presence pressing from every direction. The careful conclusion is not that daily meals are bad for everyone, or that ancient eating should be copied. Human bodies differ, and human lives differ. The truthful lesson is gentler. The body may not be wrong when it feels uneasy in abundance. It may be pointing toward the lost shape around eating. The modern world changed the surroundings of food, but the body still carries an older memory of cycles. And when those cycles are flattened, the body may speak through heaviness, dullness, restlessness, or the strange feeling that food is present, yet something important is missing. The modern world often tells the body that comfort should feel simple. Food is close, meals are predictable, and hunger can be answered before it becomes sharp. From one view, this is a great human achievement. It means fewer people have to face the old fear of not knowing where the next food will come from. It means children can be fed more reliably, elders can be cared for, families can gather, and the day can be organized with less uncertainty. That part of the story should not be dismissed. But the body is not shaped only by comfort. It is shaped by rhythm. It is shaped by the passage from one state to another. And this is why comfort can sometimes feel strangely uncomfortable. The body may be receiving safety while losing the sequence that once made food feel complete. For nearly 200,000 years, the human body lived with food as something that came through changing conditions. It came after searching, waiting, carrying, preparing, sharing, or returning. It came after the body had used energy and needed to renew itself. It came after the world had allowed something to be found. Modern food often arrives without that older context. It is present before movement, before waiting, before hunger has become clear, and sometimes before the previous meal has fully faded from the body. The body is not wrong to feel confused by this. It is not weak for feeling heavy. It is not ungrateful for abundance. It may simply be an ancient system living inside a modern environment where food has lost many of its old boundaries. The deepest mismatch is not between humans and eating. It is between human biology and constant availability. The body still expects fullness to change into lightness. It still expects stored energy to be useful. It still expects ordinary hunger to have meaning. It still expects food to answer a cycle, not to become a permanent background. When modern life keeps interrupting that cycle, eating can become less satisfying even as it becomes easier. A person may eat every day and still feel that the body is not fully restored. They may feel nourished in one sense, but rhythmically unsettled in another. This is not a medical rule, and it is not a command for anyone to imitate the past. The past was not a perfect model. It contained hardship, uncertainty, and risk. But it does show that the body's older design was built around adaptation to change. The body became human by learning to move between enough and not enough, between storing and using, between need and return. Modern abundance solved many problems, but it also removed many of the pauses that once organized those movements. This is the more compassionate way to understand the discomfort. The body is not betraying the person. The body may be telling the truth about the environment. It may be saying that food is too near too often, that the clock has become louder than hunger, that social rhythm has become stronger than biological rhythm, and that the old spaces around eating have become too narrow. A body that feels uneasy after constant meals is not necessarily asking for deprivation. It may be asking for coherence. It may be asking for the return of a clear before and after. It may be asking for eating to belong again to time, movement, need, and rest. In this sense, the ancient reason is not a dark secret hidden inside the body. It is a simple historical mismatch. One part of us belongs to a world of storage rooms, schedules, artificial light, and easy access. Another part belongs to a much older world of cycles, intervals, and changing supply. Both histories now meet inside the same body. And when eating every day feels wrong, the body may be quietly revealing where those histories no longer fit together. By the time the question reaches its quietest place, it is no longer only about eating every day. It becomes a question about what the body is trying to tell us when modern comfort does not feel completely comfortable. A person may live with food nearby, follow a normal rhythm, eat at ordinary times, and still sense that something in the body feels slightly crowded, slightly heavy, slightly out of step. The simple answer would be to blame the food, or to blame the person, or to imagine that the past gives a perfect rule. But the deeper answer is more careful. The body is not asking to return to hardship. It is not asking for fear, scarcity, or danger. It may be asking for rhythm. For nearly 200,000 years, the human body was shaped in a world where food had a before and an after. Before food, there could be movement, waiting, uncertainty, use of stored energy, attention to the environment, and the quiet rise of hunger. After food, there could be relief, storage, warmth, rest, and then the slow fading of fullness back into readiness. That movement from one state to another gave eating its place. It helped the body know where it was in time. Modern life often gives the body food without that full movement. Food can arrive before hunger has become clear. It can arrive before effort has used much energy. It can arrive because the clock says so, because the room offers it, because the day is stressful, because the screen is open, because the habit is familiar, or because the food is simply there. The body receives, but it may not feel answered. It becomes full, but not necessarily restored. This is the ancient reason beneath the modern unease. Food was never only a substance. It was once part of a larger cycle between the body and the world. When that cycle is narrowed into constant availability, the body may feel safe but not settled. It may feel protected from hunger, but also separated from the ordinary signals that once gave hunger meaning. It may feel fed, but not fully timed. This does not mean there is one correct pattern for every person. Human bodies are different. Age, health, work, sleep, pregnancy, illness, medication, culture, and personal need all matter. A truthful story about the human body must leave room for that difference. But even with those differences, the long history remains important. The body was shaped by alternation. It learned to receive and release, to store and use, to wait and return. The modern world has made receiving easier than ever, but it has not erased the body's need for the other side of the movement. Perhaps this is why eating every day can feel wrong in a way that is hard to explain. The wrongness may not be a rule. It may be a question rising from the body itself. Is there enough space between meals for fullness to fade? Is there enough movement before food to make receiving feel meaningful? Is hunger still understood as ordinary information, or has every small emptiness become something to silence? Is food still an answer to the body, or has it become a constant background around the body? These questions do not force a conclusion. They open a slower way of listening. The ancient body does not speak in words. It speaks through weight, lightness, appetite, restlessness, calm, clarity, and the small difference between being filled and being restored. If there is value in this story, it is not that the past was better. It is that the past reminds us that the body has a history deeper than the habits of the present. To care for the body may mean more than giving it food whenever food is near. It may also mean noticing the rhythm around food, the silence before it, the time after it, and the way the body changes when eating becomes an event again, not only a routine. And perhaps the quiet question is not whether eating every day is simply right or wrong, but whether the body still needs the old spaces around nourishment in order to feel whole. The value of this question is not in turning the past into a command. The past does not give a perfect instruction for modern life. It was too varied, too difficult, and too different from one place to another. Some people live near coasts, some in forests, some across open grasslands, some near rivers, some in colder places, some in warmer ones. Their foods, risks, skills, and rhythms were not all the same, but beneath that variation, one broad truth remains steady. The human body was shaped in a world where food was part of a cycle, not a constant background. That cycle did not need to be harsh to matter. It only needed to exist. There was time before food, time after food, time when the body used what it had stored, time when hunger became a signal, and time when eating returned as relief. Modern life can remove those stages without anyone noticing. A person can move from one intake to the next, from one scheduled meal to another, from one small cue to another, until food becomes less like a meaningful event and more like a continuous presence around the body. In that continuous presence, the body may lose some of its older sense of timing. It may still be nourished, but not clearly renewed. It may still be protected, but not clearly balanced. It may still be full, but not deeply settled. For nearly 200,000 years, fullness did not stand alone. It had a history before it. The body had moved, waited, used, searched, remembered, or simply lived through the interval since the last food. Fullness arrived after that interval, and because of that, it had a different weight. It was not only the stomach receiving, it was the body closing a passage for a while. In modern abundance, fullness can arrive without a passage. It can come from routine, from stress, from availability, from the hour, from a social cue, or from the simple nearness of food. The body accepts it, but may not feel that anything has been completed. This is the quiet educational message at the center of the story. Nourishment is not only about the presence of food, it is also about the rhythm in which food appears. A body can be given enough and still need time to use enough. A body can be protected from hunger and still need ordinary hunger to remain understandable. A body can live safely with regular meals and still feel better when there is a clear before and after around eating. This does not ask anyone to follow a single rule. It only invites a gentler form of attention. Instead of asking whether the body is wrong for feeling heavy, one might ask what rhythm the body has been living inside. Has food been arriving because the body has truly moved toward need, or because the day has been trained to expect it? Has fullness been allowed to fade into lightness, or has it been renewed too quickly? Has eating answered a real signal, or has it answered the environment? These questions are quiet, but they are more honest than a simple conclusion. They keep the story safe from exaggeration. They do not claim that ancient people lived perfectly. They do not claim that daily eating is always harmful. They do not claim that every body should follow the same pattern. They only recognize that the human body carries an old relationship with intervals. It was shaped to receive, but also to wait. It was shaped to store, but also to release. It was shaped to feel hunger, but not always as danger. It was shaped to make food meaningful through the space that came before it. When modern life removes that space completely, the body may feel as if nourishment has become unfinished. And perhaps the most useful lesson is simply this. The body is not only asking what we eat, it may also be asking when, why, after what, and with how much silence around it. In the end, the question does not close around a single rule. It opens around a slower way of understanding the body. Eating every day can feel wrong not because food is the enemy, and not because modern life should be rejected, but because the human body carries a rhythm older than the world that now feeds it. For nearly 200,000 years, food was not a permanent background. It was something that appeared within conditions. It came through weather, landscape, movement, memory, cooperation, season, chance, and time. The body learned to live with that changing pattern. It learned to receive food when food arrived. It learned to hold energy when there was more than the moment required. It learned to release that energy when the next intake had not yet come. It learned that hunger could be a signal, not always a danger. It learned that fullness was meant to fade, and that lightness could return before eating became meaningful again. Modern abundance has changed the outside world. It has made food safer, closer, more predictable, and more easily shared. That achievement matters. It has protected many lives from the old uncertainty of hunger. But the body's deeper timing did not begin with permanent access. It began with intervals. And when those intervals disappear, the body may feel strangely unsettled, even while it is being fed. This is the quiet, ancient reason beneath the modern discomfort. The body may not be asking for less in any simple sense. It may be asking for shape. It may be asking for a clear beginning and ending around food. It may be asking for hunger to become understandable again, for fullness to have time to soften, for stored energy to be used, for eating to arrive as an answer rather than as a constant invitation. A body can be nourished and still need rhythm. A body can be safe and still need contrast. A body can live in comfort and still carry an old memory of change. This is why the feeling should be treated gently, not with fear. It is not a reason to shame the body. It is not a reason to turn the past into a strict model. Ancient life was varied, uncertain, and often difficult. There was no single, perfect way humans ate, but there was a broad condition that shaped the human body again and again. Food came and went. The body became skilled at moving between those states. Today, the surrounding world often keeps food from going away at all. It waits in the room, in the schedule, in the screen, in the habit, in the social pause, in the late evening, in the moment of stress, in the moment of boredom. The body is invited to receive before it has finished using. It is invited to fill before it has become light. It is invited to quiet hunger before hunger has said anything clear. And after enough repetition, the body may feel crowded by a comfort it was never fully shaped to expect. The educational value of this story is not a diet, not a command, and not a warning against daily meals. It is a reminder that the body is historical. It is older than the clock. It is older than the kitchen. It is older than the idea that every day must be divided by fixed eating times. To listen to the body may mean noticing not only what enters it, but what surrounds the act of eating. Was there movement before it? Was there real hunger? Was there space after the last meal? Was the body answering need, or only answering availability? These questions do not force a final answer. They make the body less mysterious and less guilty. They show that discomfort can sometimes be a quiet form of memory, a sign that an old rhythm has been covered by a new world. And perhaps, as the night becomes still and the body settles into its own slower intelligence, the deepest question is not whether eating every day is right or wrong, but what ancient space around nourishment the modern body is still waiting to feel again.